Deep within the cathedral, in a rarely visited corridor, the air was heavy with the scent of damp stone. Livia sat at one end of a wooden bench, gesturing for Percival to join her, but the knight remained standing, frozen by the rigid protocols of his station. The silence between them stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic dripping of water and the sound of their own breathing. Finally, Livia spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it carried an invisible weight that seemed to press against Percival's armor. "I learned from the guards what you did this morning," she said. Percival's heart clenched. He began to stammer, defending his honor, claiming that Benjamin had provoked him, that he had lost control for only a moment, but Livia ignored him. She stared at the cold wall opposite them, lost in her own dark logic. "I did not ask you to see Benjamin," she whispered. "Yet you went, you barged in, you attacked him." Her voice trembled with a chilling intensity. "And the wood carving I asked for, you didn't even look for a piece of wood." Percival tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. He realized then that his excuses meant nothing against her facts. "It is your fault," she said, turning her gaze toward him. Her eyes were devoid of anger. There was only a cold, hollow condemnation. "You are Benjamin's brother. The bond of blood is special, so please, stop doing this." She leaned in, her voice softening into a sugar-coated command. "Promise me for us." The words felt like shackles. Percival, overwhelmed by a sense of impending disaster, gave a single, difficult nod. Later that night, the dormitory was swallowed by darkness. Livia lay flat on her bed, staring into the void. Then, a voice rang out from the depths of her heart. It was gentle, reassuring. It sounded exactly like Benjamin. "Your method works," Livia whispered into the dark. "He ate the pancake. He looked at me differently." The inner voice responded with a knowing warmth. "I know, because I am you." But the voice soon turned to guidance. It told her that gifts and food were not enough. To truly win Benjamin back, she had to take the final, most dangerous step. "Open your heart," the voice urged. "Tell him the truth. Tell him everything the Pale Church has done in this territory. Reveal your secrets, your regrets, your struggle." Livia's consciousness wavered. To reveal the truth was to bleed, but if it meant his forgiveness, if it meant his smile. "I will," she whispered to the empty room. "I will peel this heart open and show it to him." The air was crisp and cool the following morning as Livia entered Benjamin's cell, carrying a square object wrapped carefully in clean linen. She approached Benjamin, who sat quietly by the window, and handed him the heavy bundle. "This is a gift for you," she whispered. Benjamin untied the cloth to reveal a small, wooden sculpture of a pale goddess. It was a common trinket, painted with cheap white pigment that still smelled faintly of chemicals. He weighed the carving in his hand, examining the sorrowful expression of the deity before looking up with a smirk. "If you had carved a crude, crooked thing yourself," he teased, "I would have laughed at you for wasting your time. This, at least, proves you have the sense to buy ready-made." Livia ignored his jab. Her focus was elsewhere. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a secretive murmur. "Percival, I sent him away to handle other matters. He won't bother you again today." Benjamin raised an eyebrow, but Livia wasn't finished. Her gaze swept toward the doorway. "I have also temporarily reassigned the guards at the door to another location." Benjamin sat up straight, his eyes flickering with sudden intensity. "So, can you come with me somewhere?" After a long silence, Benjamin stood and brushed the dust from his clothes. "Of course, why not? I can't do anything else here anyway." Hours later, within the Pale Cathedral, a disastrous report exploded among the high-ranking monks. Benjamin Blackwood had vanished. A monk sent to persuade him found only an empty room, and that cheap wooden statue standing mockingly on the table. The guards, trembling with fear, explained that Sister Livia had personally ordered them to leave their posts. "Useless trash," an old monk roared, his beard trembling with rage. "How could you lose a grown man?" Percival was summoned from the outskirts, his face dark with frustration. "The nun sent me to the square," he snapped. "I know nothing of what happened inside." As the council erupted into a chaotic mess of blame and finger-pointing, Percival's patience snapped. He stepped forward, his armor striking the stone floor with a heavy, echoing thud. "What is there to argue about?" he shouted. "Sister Livia took Blackwood away." The room fell into a chilling silence. The monks exchanged inscrutable glances. Finally, the eldest monk spoke. "Sister Livia is a devout servant. She would never betray the church." But another monk countered. "What if she has strayed from the path? The elderly monk sighed, his voice turning cold. If that is the case, we have no choice but to consider replacing her. He turned his gaze to Percival. Sir Percival, find Baron Blackwood alive or dead. Percival gripped his sword hilt. He knew no one had seen them leave the main gates. There was only one place they could be. His eyes fell to the cold stone floor. Underground, he muttered. Without another word, he turned and led his knights toward the dark entrance beneath the cathedral. Deep beneath the pale cathedral, Livia hurried through the shadows, her steps echoing with a frantic, nervous energy. Every few paces, she paused, turning back to ensure Benjamin was still there. "Would you hate me like this?" she whispered. Her voice sounded thin and fragile in the hollow corridor. Benjamin's pace did not falter. "Why are you only asking this?" Livia's gaze dropped. She spoke of their past adventures, of how he once admired her unwavering piety. "But now," she bit her lip, "my actions defy the church. I have brought you to this sanctuary without permission." Benjamin stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, and offered a deal. If she told him the truth of this place without reservation, he would give her a definitive answer. Livia trembled. The word truth seemed to sting her. She began to speak, her words rushing out to outrun her unease. This place was the sanctuary, a relic of the ancient wizard empire. The church had built the cathedral over it to hide and study the ruins of that corrupt, magical civilization. "The records say they were evil," Livia explained, her voice gaining speed. "But the church discovered something here, a substance containing divine fluctuations. They believe it is the remains of the goddess of magic worshipped by the wizards of old." She took a deep breath, her tone heavy with self-reproach. "They are studying the body of a goddess, Benjamin. It is blasphemy, but the academy leaders call it a necessary evil. They say we must seize this power to protect the kingdom from the coming darkness." Benjamin's voice cut through the air. "So, the holy blood you claim to have created, it comes from this?" Livia stiffened, then nodded slowly. They reached a massive, sealed door. She pressed her hand into a hidden recess, and with a heavy, grinding groan, the way opened. Inside, the ruins of the wizard empire stood tall. Towering domes were etched with broken runes, and at the very center stood a statue, 2 people tall, carved from a strange, bone-like stone. It was rough, unfinished, and its face was a terrifying, featureless, smooth void. Livia stepped forward, a dagger appearing in her hand. Without a word, she plunged the blade into the statue's stone chest. Suddenly, a silent, psychic scream tore through Benjamin's mind, a shriek so violent it felt like his brain was splitting apart. He watched, mesmerized, as dark red, viscous liquid began to ooze from the stone wound. It crawled like a living thing, dripping onto the floor in beads of thick mercury. "This," Livia whispered, her expression haunted, "is the blood of the goddess. It is not yet the holy blood. It is something far more dangerous." The horrific scenes Aphrodite witnessed during the infiltration flashed through Benjamin's mind. The shriveled corpses, the cold injection instruments, and the agonizing suffering of the chosen ones. A logical, sickening deduction emerged. "The true holy blood, it uses the chosen ones as a medium, doesn't it?" Benjamin asked, his voice low. "Using their flesh and blood to process or dilute this primordial blood of the goddess." The last trace of color drained from Livia's face. "The blood of the goddess of magic is filled with an incomprehensible curse," she whispered. "Direct injection is highly toxic. We conducted experiments on rats, dogs, even captured dragons, without exception. They all died in extreme pain, their tissues malforming and disintegrating." She looked up at the faceless stone statue with fear and disgust. "We thought it was just a vicious creation of the ancient witch empire, until they used it on living people." Her voice trembled with struggle. "When I discovered the human experiments, it was too late. The high priest reported a breakthrough and issued direct orders. I didn't want this, but I must protect Holy Spring territory, if this is the necessary price." "The price," Benjamin interrupted. "Tell me, Livia, what does this blood actually give you?" Livia took a deep breath. "It can temporarily catalyze a chosen one's mind blade to a level close to that of a god." "Injection," Benjamin repeated, his eyes sharpened. He stepped forward and roughly grabbed Livia's wrists. He rolled up her wide nun's sleeves, and there they were, on the inside of her fair arm, several tiny, dark red needle marks. "The needles you're using are a bit too thick," Benjamin said, his voice laced with suppressed rage. You idiot, you injected this unknown filth into your body without any idea of the side effects. Did you never think the horrific state of those test subjects might befall you? He shook off her hand in disgust and turned away, his shoulders heaving. Stupid woman, he spat through gritted teeth. Benjamin, Livia called out timidly, her eyes suddenly lit up with a glimmer of hope. You're concerned about me, does that mean you've forgiven me? Benjamin stared at her, stunned by the absurdity. He let out a short, cold laugh. No way I'd forgive you, I'm calling you an expendable material, do you understand? Please forgive me, Livia pleaded, completely ignoring his warning. Suddenly thump, thump, thump heavy, hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor. They're here, Benjamin snapped, his tone turning cold. Your church is coming fast. You brought me to this forbidden area, Livia. They will see this as defection. They'll kill us both. Livia stepped in front of him, shielding him with her body. I won't let them hurt you. Benjamin sighed, realizing she was beyond logic. He closed his eyes, sending an urgent mental command through the thick rock walls. Aphrodite. It is I, Baron, the reply came instantly. The plan has changed, Benjamin projected his thoughts with desperate urgency. Act ahead of schedule, immediately, right now, come quick and get me out. After his conversation with Aphrodite, Benjamin drags 2 chairs from the corner. He picks one up with a single hand and slides it toward Livia, the metal legs screeching against the floor with a sharp, piercing sound. He sits a few steps away, crossing his legs with an air of casual indifference. Livia sits down awkwardly, her hands placed neatly on her knees like a student waiting to be reprimanded. The creak of metal mechanisms echoes through the chamber as the sanctuary door swings open. A team of fully armed figures files in, led by 4 elite temple knights in magnificent fluid armor. Among them is Percival Blackwood, his eyes complex behind his visor. Behind them stand 10 elite guardians, bristling with sharp blades and heavy shields. Benjamin quickly assesses the odds. If he fights them one-on-one, it is a 50-50 chance. If they all rush him, he'll be lucky to leave with a whole corpse. Suddenly, Livia snaps. She stands abruptly, her voice rising in frustration. Percival, who gave you permission to bring people into the sanctuary? Percival's voice is weary but firm. Sister, I have a higher obligation to protect the church from destabilizing factors. Benjamin is under my care, she retorts. The factor he is referring to, Benjamin interrupts, pointing a finger at Livia, is you. Percival's voice turns cold, like the reading of a death verdict. He informs Livia that the High Order has removed her from her position as acting lord. She is now considered a dangerous individual guilty of kidnapping and trespassing. Benjamin begins to clap, the crisp sound jarring in the silence. Excellent, he exclaims with theatrical interest. Decisive action, I have no objections. Livia looks at him, her expression wounded and incredulous. She tries to explain that her actions were for the future of the territory, but Benjamin uses his mind blade, an invisible, gentle force, to press her back into her chair. He turns to the knights, his tone shifting to a formal, authoritative resonance. He claims that through his influence, Livia has realized the church's errors and is now determined to purge its internal cancers. Livia gasps, did I say that? I am willing to do anything, Benjamin whispers to her, his smile sharp. Those were your words, Livia. The knights have no patience for drama. Without warning, a temple knight lunges, his sword burning with pale, cold flames. The blade arcs toward Benjamin's head with lethal speed. Clang! The sword stops an inch from Benjamin's scalp, hitting a translucent barrier of sacred patterns. A somber, angry voice rises from the chair beside him. Livia remains seated, her head bowed, her hair shadowing her face as she glares at the attacker. What, she whispers, her voice trembling with power, do you want to do to Benjamin? She's resisting. The shout ignites the air like a spark in a powder keg. Percival Blackwood watches in frozen horror as the situation spirals into chaos. He has no control. The Templar Knights answer only to their faith, and the Apostolic Knights live only to clear obstacles. Percival's heart hammers against his ribs. He is a mere soldier in a vast church machine, yet he knows that if Benjamin Blackwood dies here in the Holy Spring territory, it means total war. He must keep Benjamin alive, not for brotherhood, but for the very survival of TH. E-charge. The Templars charge like hungry wolves, their blades wreathed in pale, burning flames. They strike at the shimmering barriers protecting Benjamin, but Livia is a master of defense. Her psychic blades are a crystal forest, constantly shifting, dissipating, and reforming with surgical precision. But the pressure is relentless. 4 legendary Templars and 10 elite guardians swarm her from every angle. The pale flames lick at her mental energy, draining her strength. Livia is like a woman trying to block every single raindrop in a hurricane with a handful of mirrors. A gap opens, a knight lunges, his spear tip glinting inches from Benjamin's chest. Livia's heart clenches. She sees Benjamin sitting there, silent, head bowed, and she mistakes his stillness for absolute trust. A surge of desperate devotion pushes her past her limits. She forces her mind to scream, erecting a solid wall of force just in time. A soft groan escapes her. The pain in her temples is like 1,000 needles. Benjamin, however, is lost in a different kind of pain. Through his psychic link, he feels the weight of Livia's betrayal and her loyalty all at once. He thinks of his other friends, Celia and Finn, torn apart by war. He feels the crushing helplessness of trying to hold onto a friendship that the world is determined to break. Benjamin, watch out. Livia's voice cracks with terror. A Templar has breached the final line. His long sword, wreathed in holy fire, is poised to split Benjamin in two. But the sword freezes. The knight gasps, his arms locked by invisible iron hoops. Benjamin slowly raises his head. With a cold, steady gaze, he hooks his index finger upward. The powerful knight is launched, hurled like a stone into the vaulted ceiling. Crack, stone shatters. The knight falls like a puppet with its strings cut, his armor slamming into the floor with a sickening, metallic roar. Silence falls, every knight freezes, staring at the young baron. Benjamin remains seated, his fingertips trembling. He reaches up to wipe his face, and his hand comes away stained with bright, hot crimson. A nosebleed, the price for overloading the blade of thought. Benjamin, you're bleeding. Livia abandons her desperate struggle against the knights, ignoring the deadly swords and purifying fire. She rushes to Benjamin's side, frantically reaching out with an embroidered handkerchief to wipe the blood from his face. Benjamin tilts his head away. Wait, you hit too hard, he mutters. It's just a nosebleed, it won't kill you. He stops her clumsy concern, his gaze locking onto a silent figure among the ranks of armored men. Percival, Benjamin calls out, naming his second brother. Percival jolts as if struck. He raises his hand and roars in a voice bordering on a scream, "Stop!" The sanctuary falls into a sudden, heavy silence. Even the strongest temple knight halts his attack. Percival ignores them all, staring at Benjamin with a low, menacing growl. "Go ahead, say it." Benjamin stands slowly, wiping blood from his fingertips. He looks at the warriors in their pale church armor. "Percival, all of you, answer me. Do you worship the pale goddess or the pale church?" Percival instinctively begins to say both, but Benjamin cuts him off bluntly. "The fact that I have to ask means it is not a simple answer. Answer me, you who call yourselves the goddess's blade." From beneath a heavy helmet, the strongest knight declares, "The church is the embodiment of her will. There is no need for your rhetoric, Baron." Benjamin bursts into a jarring, mocking laughter that echoes through the somber hall. "Good, at least you are honest enough to admit your loyalty is to an earthly organization, and not that ethereal goddess you have already forgotten." His laughter turns to ice. He turns his back on the crowd, walking toward the faceless goddess statue. "You know you stand against her," he says coldly. "You think necessary evil justifies your actions, but I am here, and I, Benjamin Blackwood, will remove you, this rotten, festering nail, from the heart of this kingdom." He turns to Livia. "Livia, I did not come to fight your goddess. Compared to these hypocrites, I can confidently say, the pale goddess would choose a spot right beside me." The words explode like thunder. Benjamin extends his hand. "Make your choice, Livia." Livia trembles, her reason struggles against her emotions, but her body moves first. She takes a small step toward him. "Take them down," the temple knight roars, swinging his blade. Suddenly, boom. The dome shatters. Massive, dark-red thorns pour from the ceiling like pythons, weaving an impenetrable net around Benjamin and Livia. Bishop Aphrodite leaps from the wreckage, standing as a terrifying shield. "You're late," Benjamin remarks dryly. "The believers outside were enthusiastic," Aphrodite replies. A panicked monk stumbles into the hall screaming that the cathedral has been breached, not by an army, but by the people. The citizens are storming the main hall, demanding an explanation. Percival looks at the thorns, the messenger, and finally, the faceless statue. The fortress of faith was not falling from the outside, it was crumbling from within. Benjamin's voice pierced through the tangled thorns, reaching Percival's ears like a blade. When the scandals you concealed are no longer secrets, when the believers you claim to protect turn their anger against you, Percival, what choice will you make? Aphrodite maintained the thorn barrier, his voice sharp and cold. Everything that happened here, the live experiments, the goddess's remains, is known to everyone. Feel their rage, you brought this on yourselves. As if to confirm his words, a surging, clamorous sound echoed through the deep underground sanctuary, a roar of countless curses and riots. Aphrodite's late arrival had been intention. He had used the church's own intelligence network to spread the truth, igniting a fire in the hearts of the hungry and betrayed. So what? A Templar knight barked, steadying his blade. We will capture you instigators and suppress those rioters. He was cut off as a high-ranking cultivator staggered into the passage. His robes were stained with blood, his face twisted in hysteria. What are you waiting for? Go and suppress them now, he waved his arms wildly. The people have gone mad, they've smashed the icons, they've stormed the storerooms, drive them out with swords, with fire. Drive those lowly scoundrels away. Livia looked up, her gaze trembling. How can you expel the believers? She murmured, her voice rising with a long-suppressed pain. We huddle in this warm church, enjoying their offerings, while they suffer in the cold. Is this really what the goddess wants? Benjamin looked at her, seeing a flicker of the woman he once knew. You finally remembered. Benjamin, Livia turned to him, tears finally bursting forth, not of self-pity, but of pure, helpless panic. I've messed up, help me. Benjamin chuckled softly, his tone relaxed. I'll help you, just like in the past. I'm used to cleaning up your messes. Aphrodite tossed a borrowed longsword to Benjamin, who caught it in one fluid motion. In a flash, Benjamin charged the nearest knight. As the knight swung, an invisible force nudged his wrist, sending his blade crashing harmlessly into the stone. Before the knight could recover, Benjamin's sword tip was resting inches from the man's eye, peering through the slit of his helmet. You're already dead, Benjamin stated flatly. Just stay here. With a swift kick to the knight's knee, Benjamin sent the armored man crashing to the floor. He didn't look back. He walked toward the one figure who had not yet moved, Percival Blackwood. Benjamin stopped, his sword pointing toward the earth. Percival, this is the last chance. He paused, the weight of years hanging in the air. The church, or the goddess, you choose for yourself. Percival ultimately failed to make a choice. He simply stood frozen in place like a statue. No one noticed his inner turmoil and no one cared. The battle ended faster than expected. When the strongest temple knight, Rinaldo, had his sword entangled by Aphrodite's thorns, he did not force a breakthrough. Instead, he released his grip. Enough, Rinaldo said. He looked around at his fallen comrades and sighed. Continuing the fight is pointless. Aphrodite raised an eyebrow, her thorns remaining tight. She looked to Benjamin. Barren, what do you intend to do with these devout believers who tried to harm you? Benjamin wiped blood from his nose, his temples throbbing from the strain of his telekinesis. He stood ramrod straight. I am not disposing of anyone, he replied. I just want answers. Benjamin stepped toward Rinaldo. The knight spoke first. Blackwood. What exactly is your attitude towards the Pale Church? You hesitated in that fight, knight, Benjamin countered. If you truly wanted me dead, your pale fire would have burned through those thorns. Your attitude depends on your performance. The church can shelter believers, or it can become a monster that tramples on life. The choice is not mine, but yours. Rinaldo nodded slowly, his armor scraping with a metallic ring. He picked up his sword, holding it horizontally across his chest in a gesture of solemn respect. May the goddess guide your path, he whispered. May she guide you back to the right path. The group began the long trek out of the underground sanctuary. Livia followed half a step behind Benjamin, her fingers twisting the cuffs of her robe. She was drowning in guilt, unable to find the words to ask for forgiveness. She turned to Aphrodite, asking what would happen next. Aphrodite merely shrugged. I haven't even decided what to have for dinner. The Baron is out and his biggest worry is resolved. I just want a good drink in a rose garden. But as they reached the cathedral, the mood shifted. The sacred hall was a disaster. An angry mob filled the room. Benches were overturned, icons were covered in dust, and the air was thick with the smell of sweat and burning tension. When the crowd spotted them, a roar went up. The Baron is out. Then they saw Livia. The air turned cold. Sister, why did you imprison him? Have you betrayed the goddess? The accusations pierced Livia like physical blades. She trembled, unable to look them in the eye. But then, Benjamin took a step forward. He stood between Livia and the crowd, shielding her from their piercing gazes. Everyone, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, please be quiet. The room fell into a heavy silence. Benjamin waited until every eye was fixed on him. He did not offer an accusation or a defense. Instead, he spoke with quiet gravity. I am sorry to have caused you all suffering these past few days. Aphrodite stood to the side, the scorched hole in his sleeve still faintly smelling of burnt fabric. He watched the scene with a cold, almost mocking detachment. To him, the people of Holy Spring territory were living in luxury compared to the rest of the world. Yet here was the Baron, acting as if he had arrived to save them from the brink of total ruin. I am sorry to have caused you all suffering, Baron Benjamin Blackwood's voice rang out steady and certain. You have endured hunger, cold, and the sting of betrayal, but I tell you now, food and fuel are coming. A low murmur rippled through the massive crowd. Benjamin leaned forward, his words cutting through the freezing air. The United Commune caravan is gathering supplies. Grain and fuel will arrive by sunset tomorrow. I will not stand by while you freeze, and I will not leave until order is restored. It was the answer they craved, in a moment where their idols were crumbling. This promise of survival was more powerful than any prayer. More people flooded into the cathedral, not just protesters, but anxious believers, ironically gathering to hear the word of a man their own church had once imprisoned. Suddenly, a sharp voice pierced the silence. What about the rumors? Is the church conducting experiments? Are they violating the goddess? The air turned to ice. An elderly monk scrambled from behind a pillar, his face flushed with terror. Shut up, you ignorant lambs, those are lies spread by heretics. But the crowd roared back, drowning him out. Let the Baron speak, we want the truth. Benjamin didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the trembling figure shrinking into the shadows behind him. Livia, he whispered, shall we speak, or shall you? Livia felt as if she were being tortured. She was the pale goddess's representative, the very image of holiness. If she spoke the truth, the world would break. She took one agonizing step forward. What they said, she began, her voice barely a whisper yet echoing in the silence, is true. The church is secretly doing things contrary to the teachings. The silence that followed was deafening. There was no immediate anger, only a profound, hollow sense of loss. The believers began to whisper among themselves. If the church had sinned, then the cold and the hunger weren't just bad luck. They were divine punishment. They looked at Benjamin with a new, fearful reverence. Was he their punisher or their last chance? The crowd began to drift away, dejected and broken. Livia watched them, her soul feeling as though it had been ripped out. She had ruined everything. Later, in a quiet corridor, Livia found the old monk who had tried to silence the crowd. He was bruised and battered, beaten by his own subordinates who had snapped upon hearing the truth. Livia stared at him, paralyzed, until Benjamin's voice drifted from the shadows. Are you crying? She flinched, wiping her eyes. Benjamin sat beside her, his tone pragmatic. The convoy is coming, Livia. The blockade is lifted. The people will not die. But the church, she sobbed, the trust is gone. Trust can be restored, Benjamin interrupted, looking directly into her eyes. Just like I am to you, I need you, Livia. I need your identity and your influence to restore order. It wasn't a promise of love or forgiveness. It was a statement of utility. But to Livia, it was a lifeline. Meanwhile, in Frosttown, Chesvia looked up from a report on mutating bioactive liquids. Evelyn had just handed her an urgent note from the Baron. He wants me in Holy Spring territory immediately, Chesvia sighed, stretching languidly. Doesn't he know how busy I am? The master emphasized, Evelyn replied, that it has to be you. Chesvia stood, a crimson light flashing in her eyes. Fine, I suppose I miss the pale church and their delicious little secrets. Deep within the underground sanctua, the special cells of the Pale Church welcomed a most unique group of inhabitants. The Paladin Knights, the elite force of the goddess, sat on cold stone beds, staring blankly at one another. The most glaring detail was the gap in the prison bars, left wide open by the bishop Aphrodite. Benjamin had even refused to repair the locks. "You can leave any time you want," he had told them. "If the prison bed isn't warm enough, go home to sleep. Just remember to come back during the day." To the young knights, these words were a stinging humiliation. One naive recruit actually stepped toward the gap, but he was immediately blocked by three veterans, Rinaldo, Percival, and an old Templar. Percival's voice was like ice as he asked, "Is the dignity of a Templar knight less important to you than a bed?" That afternoon, the recruit was drilled for 6 hours in the cell's open space, a brutal reminder that stepping out would turn them from prisoners into fugitives. Benjamin visited occasionally in the evenings, carrying a food box like an old friend. He spoke of trivial things, heating restored in nearby villages or Sister Livia being scolded by the elderly. Each detail stung. While the knights sat idle, Benjamin was reshaping their world. But Benjamin wasn't just killing time, he was hunting for intelligence. He asked directly about the church's strength, and Rinaldo surprisingly answered just as decisively. He revealed the 4,000 holy knights in the east and the secret numbers of those favored by God. When the other knights whispered of betrayal, Rinaldo simply closed his eyes. "He spared us," he whispered. "That means he sees value in us." The tension in the cell finally broke when Rinaldo admitted he was tired of the church's petty politics. "Let's just consider it another form of vacation," he said, and slowly the knights began to chuckle. Above ground, the scene was different. In the cleaned cathedral hall, Benjamin sat with Sassoon, a high-ranking monk of the hidden church. Sassoon was uneasy, shifting in his seat as Benjamin poured him wine. "Are you planning to completely seize control of Holy Spring territory?" Sassoon asked, his voice low. Benjamin didn't blink. "There's no reason to give back what you've already got." Sassoon warned of the church's overwhelming force, but Benjamin only laughed with an arrogant composure. "How can you accomplish great things if you're always looking back?" Sassoon stared at him, finally seeing the fire that drew others to the Baron's side. Benjamin raised his glass, a smile playing on his lips. "Let's have a drink first," he said. "We're all friends, let's talk while we drink. Chasvia is coming." The news did not rattle the knights or the monks, but for Livia, it was a source of profound anxiety. Her dread took root days earlier during a quiet conversation with Bishop Aphrodite. While Benjamin was buried under a mountain of paperwork, Aphrodite had leaned against the cathedral cloister, his voice dropping into a low, conspiratorial drawl. "Chesvia," he had mused, "is a tough character. In Frosttown, she is second only to the Baron, above everyone else." He described a woman who reviewed the Baron's every plan, a woman who could float in midair and dismantle a dozen guards in a heartbeat. But the words that pierced Livia's heart like a needle were these: "She and the Pale Goddess have an inextricable connection." Livia felt a cold shiver of crisis. She was once the bridge to the divine, but her identity was now stained by betrayal. If this newcomer held the goddess's favor and the Baron's ear, what meaning of existence remained for Livia? Driven by a desperate need to prove her worth, Livia volunteered to greet the arrival. "I am the lord of this territory," she told Benjamin, her voice trembling with forced calm. "It is only right that I go." The carriage arrived at the cathedral amidst clouds of white steam. When the door opened, a figure stepped out into the moonlight. She was younger than Livia, with flowing silver hair and striking blood-red eyes that scanned the surroundings with predatory grace. This was Chasvia. As she approached, the air seemed to thicken with her absolute presence. Livia opened her mouth to offer a welcome, but Chesvia spoke first, her voice languid and sharp. "You must be Sister Livia," she said, "the one who put Benjamin under house arrest here, aren't you?" Livia froze, the prepared words died in her throat. She wanted to defend herself, to explain her regret, but she could only stand there, lips trembling. Chesvia didn't wait for an answer. "Take me to him," she commanded. "The Baron is waiting." As they walked through the scarred halls of the cathedral, Chesvia's gaze lingered on the murals. She mocked the depictions of the pale goddess with an eerie, intimate certainty, noting that the goddess hated gold and that her poses were all wrong. When Livia tried to defend the church's new path under Benjamin's guidance, Chesvia's red eyes remained cold. "Old mistakes don't disappear," she whispered. "They are still there, watching you." Finally, they reached Benjamin's office. He looked up, nodding to them both. "You're here, thank you for your hard work." Chesvia stepped inside, skipping all pleasantries. "I have arrived, Baron. Now, show me the dark secrets of the Pale Church." "The church has no dark secrets," Livia blurted out, her face flushing with sudden, desperate heat. "Under the goddess's radiance, everything is light and bright." Chesvia turned, her eyes narrowing as she studied Livia's frantic expression. "Light and bright," she repeated softly. "Okay then, I shall have to look forward to it." "You must be tired from coming all this way. Do you need to rest first?" Benjamin's voice echoed softly, but Chesvia's reply was crisp and cold. "No need for formalities, just take me there. I can't wait for the new recovery facility." "Benj." Ammon nodded and turned to lead the way. Chesvia followed, but Livia hesitated, her shadow stretching long against the stone floor before she trailed silently behind. "You came along too?" Chesvia asked, never once turning her head. "Is it because you have nothing to do, sister?" The barb made Livia gasp. She clenched her hands, hiding them within her wide sleeves. "I am the lord of Holy Spring Territory," she replied, her voice trembling. "When guests visit, proper etiquette cannot be omitted." Chesvia chuckled, a dry, mocking sound that made Livia's cheeks burn. "Livia is quite strong," Benjamin interjected from the front. "Next, we're going to see the remains of the goddess of magic. It's always good to have an extra layer of security." The remains of the goddess. The word sent a shiver down Livia's spine. She knew the secrets of the sanctuary, but hearing such a blasphemous term out loud felt like a physical blow. They descended into the underground sanctuary. The air grew heavy. Oil lamps flickered on the walls, casting dancing shadows as Benjamin asked, "How was Froston while I was gone?" "The same old troubles," Chesvia replied. "Permafrost, cracked water pumps, and your older brother almost blew up the workshop again. Sulev was so angry he blocked 3 of his projects." Benjamin sighed. "Let's talk about something bigger." "The western frontier," Chesvia said, her tone shifting. "The Deadborn have appeared there in massive numbers. They are fighting Prince Alkea's army head-on." Benjamin paused. "And the situation?" "Alkea is powerful. He has suppressed the outbreaks and unified the Western Territory in record time. He is no longer just a prince. He is a major player on the chessboard." Benjamin's gaze darkened, and his attitude toward us. "Ask Evelyn for the details," Chesvia retorted. "But I must warn you, your divine mandate slogan has reached his ears. To Alkea, you might just be a noisy rat that needs crushing." They reached the deepest part of the sanctuary. Before them stood the faceless statue of the goddess. "This is it," Benjamin whispered, "the source of the holy blood." Chesvia stepped forward, her eyes vibrant, glowing red, scanning the hall. "Very good, at least this time it's in reality." She turned to Benjamin, her voice sharp. "I've begun researching the samples. The blood enhances the Nen blade, but the side effects are still unknown. However, I can guarantee one thing: I will make the processing less bloody. I won't treat the chosen ones as disposable firewood." "Impossible," Livia blurted out. "If that were possible, the church wouldn't." "The church," Chesvia interrupted, her voice turning ice cold. "You tie living people to altars and drain them dry. Is that the wisdom of your pale church?" Livia shrank back, defeated, sliding down the wall in silence. Benjamin watched Chesvia closely. Her eyes were red, a sign of madness, yet she was perfectly lucid. "It was wrong." Chesvia ignored him, reaching out to touch the cold stone of the faceless goddess. "Seriously," she murmured, "what is this subtle unease?" As her fingers brushed the statue, the entire sanctuary began to tremble. Mutation. The instant the word exploded in Benjamin's mind, the disaster had already begun. As Chesvia's fingers brushed the faceless goddess, the statue didn't just crack, it shattered as if struck by an invisible hammer. From the stone, a crimson liquid gushed forth, not splashing, but moving like a living tentacle. It transformed into a jet of blood, piercing Chesvia's back with impossible speed. Benjamin lunged from his chair, knocking it over, but he was too late. Chesvia's body stiffened, hovering half a foot off the ground, her face contorted not in pain but in pure, turbulent rage. Benjamin didn't hesitate. He activated his psychic blade at full power, piercing into her chaotic mind to stabilize her. For a moment, he saw a vision, a sea of people, a flag, and a woman who looked like a more mature Chesvia. She stood in a wasteland of pale flowers under a leaden sky, whispering, "I've been waiting for you for a long time." Suddenly, an irresistible force threw Benjamin back into reality. His temples throbbed as he watched Chesvia roar, "Get out of my body." Blinding blue-white lightning crackled around her, and fine white cracks appeared on her skin like breaking porcelain. She was forcing the invading blood out through sheer will. The blood coalesced into a pulsating ball and, in a blur, rushed straight at Livia. "Livia, stop her!" Benjamin shouted. But the fluid split, streaming into Livia's mouth and nose. Livia's eyes dilated, her trembling stopped, and she turned mechanically toward Chesvia. She raised a finger, no incantations, no gestures. The space of the sanctuary crumpled. Countless translucent barriers, sharp as razors, slashed toward Chesvia, shredding everything in their path. Livia's defense had become a killing field. Chesvia reacted instantly, erupting a tsunami of pale, pure fire from her palm. The flames met the barriers in a silent annihilation. Benjamin tried to reach Livia's mind, but he was met with a wall of malice so cold it made him cough up blood. Livia was gone, erased. A gentle force pushed Benjamin back just as a lethal barrier hissed through the air where he had stood. He looked up to see Chesvia standing over him, her silver hair swaying in a veil of protective fire. "Chesvia, are you still there?" he gasped. She didn't turn, her crimson eyes fixed on the monster in Livia's skin. "I'm not so vulnerable," she murmured, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Livia, or whatever now wore her, was a whirlwind of distorted force, systematically leveling the sanctuary. "What do we do?" Benjamin asked, his plans in ruins. Chesvia took a deep breath, her flames burning fiercer. "What else?" she retorted. "We dig that damned thing out of her mind." The thunderous roar from the underground sanctuary signaled a disaster in motion. Aphrodite, the bishop of the mortuary, kicked the doors open, leading a squad of tense, armed knights into the rotunda, but as he stepped inside, the air above him distorted. A premonition of death pierced his spine like an ice pick. Instinctively, Aphrodite lunged forward, hitting the ground in a disheveled heap. Zwoosh! A massive, semi-transparent barrier, gleaming with a deadly white light, swept through the space like a divine guillotine. It sliced through the stone wall behind him with a sickening, teeth-grinding scrape. As the heavy masonry slid apart and crashed into the dust, Aphrodite looked up to see a hall ravaged by an invisible storm. In the center of the ruins stood Benjamin, half-soaked in blood and surrounded by pale, flickering flames. "Aphrodite, don't come any closer," Benjamin roared. Gritting his teeth, Aphrodite summoned a path of thorns to bridge the gap. But as he moved to step forward, that terrifying premonition exploded again. He threw himself back just as the very thorns he had created were sheared away, the cuts as smooth as a mirror. A scream tore through the air. Behind him, two knights were a fraction of a second too slow. The horizontal barrier severed them at the waist, their steel armor offering no more resistance than paper. "Retreat!" Aphrodite bellowed at the survivors. "Seal the entrances, no one enters without my order." As the horrified knights fled, Aphrodite knelt at the threshold, sweat beading on his brow. He watched the spatial slicing storm, feeling helpless against such intangible lethality. "If you can control Livia, do it now," Benjamin shouted. "If not, we have to retreat." Chesvia stood before Benjamin, her crimson eyes reflecting the pale fire. "Control," she whispered coldly, "then I'll just kill her." In an instant, Chesvia condensed her flames into a blazing white spear of judgment. She raised her hand, and the metal of the dome melted into javelins crackling with blue-white lightning. "Aphrodite!" Benjamin screamed. The bishop understood. As the fire and thunder descended, Aphrodite roared, "Reject!" Thick thorns erupted beneath Livia, forming an impenetrable fortress around her. The fire carbonized the exterior and lightning shattered the surface, but the thorns of rejection relentlessly regrew to fill the gaps. Chesvia's eyes flashed with impatience. "She is corrupted, Benjamin. There is no saving her." "I know," Benjamin whispered, stepping between the goddess and her prey, "but I'll still try." Ignoring Chesvia's warnings, Benjamin pushed his mind blade to full power, forcing a consciousness connection. He dove into the darkness, searching for a single grain of light in a sea of malice. Finally, he found it, a flickering candlelight, fragile and small. "Livia," he called out with all his willpower. The flame wavered, a faint sobbing gasp echoed back through the void. "No, don't, I hurt you again." The candle flame flickered, a fragile spark in the suffocating dark. Benjamin watched it, his heart surging with a long-suppressed anxiety. "I didn't come here to listen to your discouraging words," he roared into the silence. Livia struggled against him, her voice thick with self-loathing. "Leave me alone, I'm just a stupid woman anyway." Benjamin's anger burned. "Why do you people always go against me? You never listen. You hurt yourselves and you hurt others." He paused, his voice suddenly dropping to a fractured whisper. "But even so, I hope you can live well." From the depths of the trembling light, a faint plea emerged. "Forgive me." "I will never forgive," Benjamin countered sharply. He felt the light flinch, but he pressed on. "If you don't wake up, I'm going to die in this godforsaken place with you." "No," the light erupted, burning with a sudden, fierce intensity. In reality, the pale flames surrounding Chesvia shifted. They became precise, like surgical blades, peeling away the last strands of crimson blood from Livia's body. Chesvia trapped the thrashing, dark ichor inside a crystal jar. "Quiet down," she commanded, a spark of electricity from her fingertips silencing the beast within. Benjamin and Livia opened their eyes simultaneously. Benjamin was battered, blood seeping from his nose and ears, but his gaze was clear. Livia let out a choked sob and pounced, her arms locking around him like iron clamps. "Forgive me," she wept into his shoulder. "I thought I would never." Benjamin winced as she aggravated his wounds, but eventually he sighed. "Never mind." As the chaos settled, Benjamin turned to the business of death. 2 nights had fallen. "Order the best coffins," he told Aphrodite. "Sturdy and respectable, let them show off a bit down there." Chesvia stood apart, watching the scene. She looked at her hands, where the pale fire of the goddess now lived, a gift she never asked for. She saw the knights watching her, their eyes filled with a terrifying, newfound piety. "Chesvia," Benjamin called out, finally detaching himself from Livia. "Let's talk alone." Livia tried to follow, but Benjamin stopped her with a casual remark. "By the way, do you remember that second personality you talked to late into the night, the one who listened to your fears?" Livia froze. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It was him. It had always been him. Benjamin didn't look back. He walked toward Chesvia, who waited with an expectant brow. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked. Benjamin stood before her, the weight of the day finally settling on his shoulders. "Thank you," he said softly, "for recognizing me." After hearing those words, Chesvia's smile subtly changed. You're welcome," she waved her hand, her tone returning to its usual perfunctory manner. "Who told me to be so nice to you?" She paused for a very brief moment. "I was deeply resting." The pause was so brief, almost imperceptible, but Benjamin caught it. He didn't speak, he simply watched her. Chesvia looked away, switching the crystal jar to her other hand as if it had suddenly grown heavy. "But you have more to say than just that, don't you?" She strode toward a side corridor leading to an inner room. "Come on, I will answer everything you want to know. Only to you, there are no secrets." Benjamin followed her. He asked directly, "What happened to you? What is with the flames and the lightning?" Chesvia didn't stop. "Shouldn't you first ask why the statue shattered, why it possessed Livia?" "I'm more concerned about what's happening to you," Benjamin countered. "As your only fellow countryman in this world, I don't want to see anything happen to you." Silence fell, broken only by the rhythm of footsteps echoing down the corridor. A moment later, Chesvia let out a soft breath, a sigh that escaped from her throat. "For me," her voice dropped lower, "the same goes for me." She stopped and turned. The corridor was narrow, leaving less than 2 steps between them. Chesvia raised her hand, her fingertips hovering above his shoulder where a gruesome wound sliced from his collarbone to his shoulder blade. Her fingertips touched the skin. There was no sting, only a gentle energy, like a spring stream flowing over frozen ground. Benjamin felt the muscle fibers reconnecting, the broken capillaries sprouting new life. "It's really terrifying," Chesvia whispered, staring at the healing flesh. "If this wound were any deeper." "But it wasn't," Benjamin interrupted nonchalantly. Chesvia raised her eyes, searching his. "I'm not kidding you." She stared at him for 2 seconds, then looked away to finish the healing. When only a faint white mark remained, she finally spoke. I came into this world with a mission. I dream of landscapes I've never seen, people I've never met. Those memories don't belong to me. But they are shaping me. Those memories belong to the pale goddess, Benjamin said. Chesvia didn't deny it. She confessed that her stories of her parents were lies, memories that never existed. From the moment I opened my eyes in that border town, I was in a daze, but now I realize I was waiting for someone. I was waiting for you. Benjamin's breathing hitched. This isn't romantic speculation, she said calmly. My time in this world only truly began to turn when you walked into that mud house. Back then, I thought I was just a time traveler seeking safety with another of my kind. She took a step back, gesturing to his shoulder. Treatment complete. Benjamin looked at her, his voice steady. I want to know more about you, not for profit, but because of how much I value you. Chesvia looked back at him. I'm willing to tell you everything, but first, standing before you now, what kind of person am I to you? Benjamin hesitated. Friend, partner, those were too easy. He looked into her eyes. ND gave the only honest answer. The person standing in front of me is a stranger. Chesvia's eyelashes twitched. Unfamiliar, she repeated. Unfamiliar, Benjamin confirmed, because there is so much I don't know, but you are also a friend, because no matter what mission you bring or what you ultimately become, that will not change. Chesvia's laughter echoed through the air, not a polite giggle, but a genuine, unrestrained outburst. She covered her mouth with the back of her hand, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Benjamin looked away, his voice tight. No, it's not that funny. You're burdened with dark secrets now. Isn't it normal that I'd feel unfamiliar with you? Chesvia finally caught her breath, though traces of amusement lingered in her eyes. It's perfectly normal, Benjamin. You just have a way of making me laugh when I least expect it. Her expression shifted, becoming more serious. However, let me correct one point. I don't have any dark secrets. I am not the Pale Church. Benjamin didn't argue. Instead, he leaned in. Let's talk about your life then. When did you start remembering all of this? Chesvia leaned back against the cold stone wall. It wasn't like a game, she murmured. No sudden ding or a chunk of memory hitting my brain. It was, little by little. She looked at her hands. Before this, I was just a transmigrator who had lost her way. Because of you, I accepted being the Minister of Agriculture. I could farm, I could analyze. It was enough to survive. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. But memories don't leave just because you accept a new life. They change me. Sometimes, I'm afraid, am I still the same person once I remember everything? In my eyes, you are, Benjamin replied firmly. A person's essence doesn't change because of a memory. It adds depth, yes, but it doesn't change who you are. Chesvia looked up, a teasing glint returning to her eyes. Those memories, they don't belong to this era. I have stood at very high places and witnessed distant storms. Perhaps I only appear young and cute, but in reality I am mature and composed. Just say you're old, Benjamin interrupted. No need for metaphors. Chesvia's eyes narrowed. She raised her index finger and a cluster of pale, pure flames began to burn quietly at the tip. I should remind you, she said with a dangerous sweetness, that I'm not the weakling I used to be. Benjamin stared at the flame, speaking slightly faster than usual. A person I admire once said that women are like fine wine. The older they get, the better they become. Chesvia stared at him for a long beat before extinguishing the flame. That is really uncomfortable to hear. She shook her head, returning to the mystery of her past. The memories are fragmented, like a movie where I am the protagonist but the plot is missing, until now. She took a breath, uttering 4 words with no reverence, only a strange calm. The Pale Goddess. Benjamin froze. You mean, I have a claim to the Pale Church? Chesvia rolled her eyes so vividly that the heavy atmosphere instantly vanished. Don't get your hopes up. She is still alive somewhere. I am becoming her, but we are different individuals. Benjamin sighed, his tone softening. In my heart, it's enough that you're still Chesvia. He paused, looking at her fingertips where a blue-white arc of electricity now flickered. But tell me, how can you conjure a current in a world that can't even generate electricity? Chesvia watched the restless spark dance across her skin before it dissipated into the air. To be honest, I don't know. It's as natural as breathing, but I can't explain it. She looked up at him, a determined smile touching her lips. But sooner or later, we'll figure it out. Benjamin met Livia at the corner of the corridor. She stood as if she had been waiting for a long time, and the moment she saw him, her eyes lit up, only to quickly dim again as if she were hiding a lapse in composure. "You have something to say to me?" Benjamin asked, stopping in his tracks. Livia nodded, then shook her head before finally whispering, "There is something." The corridor was bustling with monks, guards, and officials. Seeking privacy, Benjamin pointed to a semi-open prayer room nearby. Inside the small, simple room, Benjamin sat heavily, his shoulders stiff from blood loss. Livia sat opposite him, her posture upright, her hands folded tightly on her knees. A silence stretched for 3 seconds. "You and Ms. Chesvia," Livia began softly, "talked for a long time." Benjamin leaned back, stretching. "It seems like it's been a while," he replied casually, "but it's been quite pleasant." Livia's eyelashes trembled. "Happy," she repeated, "more happy than before." Benjamin was confused. What are you talking about?" Livia snapped back to reality with a stiff smile. She lowered her eyes, murmuring that she was thinking of when he had pretended to be her during their heart-to-heart talks. "You really have a bad heart," she whispered. Benjamin shifted comfortably. "I actually found it quite interesting. It's like getting to know a different side of you." Livia pondered those words, unsure how to respond. She quickly changed the subject, asking when he had become a chosen one of the gods. Benjamin dismissed it as a recent accident. Livia offered to teach him how to use Nen blades, to show him how to avoid overdrawing his mental energy, but Benjamin's gaze remained strictly professional. "Okay," he said before pivoting to business. "Have you figured out what to do next?" "I will respect your arrangements," Livia replied. Benjamin's tone shifted into the cold, efficient mode of a lord. He informed her that the Pale Church in Holy Spring territory would now belong only to him. Livia's fingers clenched her sleeves, but she nodded in agreement. He warned her that her former allies would now see her as a traitor. A conflict was inevitable. "I'm prepared," Livia said with resolute resignation. "Standing by your side is a way of repaying you." Benjamin then spoke of the capital and the dead. His voice grew heavy with determination. "I will not stand idly by. I will take it over completely. Absolute." Livia looked at his pale face, his furrowed brow, and the fire in his eyes. "You now," she breathed, "you shine like a hero." Benjamin paused, looking at her with pure confusion. "I'm talking about serious matters. It should sound serious, right?" Livia blushed, apologizing for the interruption. Benjamin moved on to the southern reach, mentioning Princess Celia and Finn. He insisted he must see them. "Take me with you," Livia pleaded. "I will protect you. I will help you persuade them." Benjamin didn't hesitate. "No buts, you are the lord of this territory. I need you here to manage the church." Livia's fingers loosened their grip on her skirt. "It's nothing," she whispered. "It was my oversight." Finally, Benjamin asked about the ancient documents from the underground sanctuary. When Livia confirmed they were safe, he nodded. "Perfect. Chesvia will need them." Livia stiffened. "Chesvia again." After Benjamin left, Livia sat alone as the golden sunlight faded from her palm. She didn't pray for him to look back at her. She simply prayed that his path would be illuminated. Then she stood up. There was work to do, reports to review, and enemies to monitor. She no longer had time to sit and wait for a ray of sunlight that would never return. He was waiting. In a boundless darkness where time loses all meaning, a wisp of consciousness lingered on the edge of total dissipation. He had waited for a century or perhaps only a moment, searching for a vessel. He had watched powerful bodies pass him by, but their souls were always fragile, tamed by faith, molded by dogma, crushed by cowardice. To him, such souls were cheaper than the lowest reptile. He was fading into nothingness, his mind becoming blurred, until he saw it. Amidst the chaotic streams of consciousness, a light erupted. It was not pious or gentle. It was a light burning with ferocity and rage. It was a dying soul, howling and roaring against the brink of death. What perfect anger! He greedily seized that soul, pulling it back with his final strength. He called out a name, rekindling the fading spark. "Calvin!" "My sword!" A roar exploded in the void. Calvin's consciousness thrashed like a caged beast. "Where is my sword?" He wanted to tear apart the undead. He wanted to fight. He wanted... "Shut up!" A cold, disdainful voice interrupted him. "What a rude person. Why did I choose you of all people?" Calvin froze. He was not on the battlefield. He was in a void of endless shadow, facing a figure emitting a cold, eerie glow, light pink hair, exquisite features, a face he knew all too well. Conrad, Calvin's voice was lick. Ice. Before him stood the kingdom's third prince, the madman who had turned the capital into a death trap. Conrad sized him up with a slight smile. Not bad, at least you aren't a hunting dog that only knows how to bite. Calvin remained silent, his mind racing. He realized that if he was still alive, it was because this monster had saved him. To make a long story short, Conrad began, his tone dismissive, I need you to do something for me, and don't be wary. Whether you like it or not, I don't care. After all, I am already dead. Calvin's eyes flickered. You mean, I am speaking to a corpse? Conrad nodded. He explained that he needed a man who could get things done. He wanted revenge to cause trouble for the woman who had betrayed and killed him. I have no interest in the throne, Conrad continued, his voice rising with a morbid, devout longing. What is power? It is nothing to the gods. I want to transcend the mundane. I want to reclaim the lost magic of the old wizard empire, a feat that will make me immortal. Calvin looked at him with pure coldness. You have caused a disaster, widespread suffering. Conrad waved a hand dismissively. What do other people's lives have to do with me? He began to spin a tale of ancient history of an empire where wizards dismembered and killed their own goddess of magic to exploit her power. Conrad claimed to have inherited their dark achievements. I want to resurrect the goddess of magic, Conrad whispered, his face twisted with fervor, to let magic return to this barren land. But then the air grew heavy. The triumph faded from Conrad's face, replaced by a gloomy realization. I overlooked one thing, he said softly. When a life dies, the soul dissipates. The one who is resurrected, no matter how similar, is never the same person. He looked at Calvin with a self-deprecating smile. The goddess who has awakened, she is just a talking corpse. Calvin felt a chill strike his heart as Conrad finished. One born from death, a goddess. I was deceived. Conrad's voice had lost its polished edge. The mask of the superior noble was slipping, revealing a raw, jagged mixture of anger and self-mockery. I was so caught up in joy, he whispered, that I was completely blind to his lie. I thought I was ushering in a new era, but in that era there was no place for me. Conrad looked at Calvin and smiled, a cold, hollow expression. To be precise, there is no place for any life. That was the era of the dead. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low hiss. He has been preparing for hundreds of years. He was just waiting for an arrogant idiot like me to awaken him. I will never forget this humiliation, even if it means death. Calvin watched him, refusing to believe a single word. He remembered what Celia once said of her brother. This is a man who lies all the time, but Conrad no longer seemed to care about belief. Like a walking corpse with nothing left to hide, he was Imply pouring out his final bitter truths. What do you want me to do? Calvin asked. Conrad's smile deepened. Before I died, I left behind a gift. Perhaps it can cause some trouble for that woman, the crown of the wind, the symbol of the king. It is an ornament now, but I left the last magic of this era upon it. Go get it. He spoke as if giving a trivial order. Consider it compensation for my foolishness. Just hand it to someone you trust. Before Calvin could demand an answer, his vision began to blur. His very limbs were becoming transparent. Don't make a fuss, Conrad's fading voice drifted through the air. We are only here because my mind blades are keeping our souls tethered, but your time is running out. Darkness rushed in, the final word echoed from a great distance, night. Calvin woke as if from a disturbing dream. He tried to open his eyes, but the movement was agonizingly slow, like trying to command a body that no longer belonged to him. When he finally succeeded, he saw the horror. Dark, crystalline vines clung to his armor, spreading from his chest to his fingertips. His skin was ashen. His knuckles were stiff. He realized the truth. He was already dead. There was no time for grief. Calvin flexed his fingers, bending, stretching, forcing the dead nerves to obey. He tried to summon his Nen blade. The sky tilts, but there was no response. The goddess of mercy only blesses the living. He looked around. He was in the royal palace of Lingfeng. This was where he had first met Princess Celia, where she had defeated him in a duel and then reached out a hand to pull him up, smiling in the sunlight. The sound of heavy footsteps broke his reverie. Two Deathborn knights emerged from the shadows, their eye sockets burning with black and white flames. Calvin did not hesitate. He lunged, his movements stiff but his instincts sharp. He wrenched a sword from the grasp of the nearest undead and severed its head in one fluid motion. He caught his reflection in the flat of the blade. A withered, sunken face stared back. He was a monster, a walking corpse. It was only Conrad's lingering magic that allowed him to keep his mind. More undead surged into the corridor. Calvin gripped the hilt of his sword. He thought of the simple soldiers he had protected, the feeling of finally being a hero. He looked at the monsters approaching and raised his steel. He was dead, but he was still here. He would make this corpse the kingdom's sharpest sword one last time. He would find the crown. He would find someone worthy. Calvin strode forward into the dark, the black and white flames in his eyes burning with a final, defiant light. Barren. Sokka's voice echoed deep within Benjamin's consciousness, carrying a long unheard, gentle warmth that belonged only to old friends. It's been so long since I heard your voice. In the cathedral's makeshift office, Benjamin leaned back and closed his eyes. As the connectio and through the mind blade solidified, the world around Sokka flooded into his mind. Benjamin sounded tired, overwhelmed by recent troubles, yet he felt a sudden, deep sense of relief. Sokka smiled. "You are on the front lines against the dead," he said solemnly. "As the bishop of the sacred garden, I salute you." "The true warriors are in Stone Cliff," Benjamin countered softly. "I have only provided support." Sokka did not argue. He simply shifted his gaze, allowing Benjamin's consciousness to see what he saw. 12 men stood beside the bishop. They were wounded, wrapped in blood-stained bandages, and exhausted, yet they stood ramrod straight. They were a coalition of different factions, united by a single goal. Maltz, a Griffin knight from Stone Cliff, stepped forward. His left leg was oozing blood. "Bishop," he rasped, "everyone is ready." Sokka looked at the wound. "Are you fit to fight?" Maltz gripped his sword hilt. "I still have the strength to swing it." Sokka respected their resolve. These 13 souls were forcing their way into the palace to disrupt a dark ceremony, a ritual where the number of the dead was increasing at a terrifying rate. "I will buy a chance for those fighting outside to catch their breath," Sokka declared. Benjamin could not stop him. He could only promise one thing: "I am watching, I am witnessing." The 13 figures stormed the palace. Sokka, chosen by the gods, moved with terrifying grace. His mind blade materialized into razor-sharp threads that decapitated the undead and indestructible shields that turned away their spears. "Sokka, trouble ahead," Benjamin's voice warned. A stitched-together monstrosity blocked their path, a bloated, deformed giant made of 100 limbs, its many faces weeping and roaring. Sokka didn't slow down. He gathered his power, compressing it until it exploded in a dazzling river of light. When the radiance faded, the monster and the entire corridor had been erased. "So strong," Benjamin whispered, shocked. But the cost was high. Sokka was panting, his energy drained. As they pushed deeper, Benjamin's own mental burden grew. He was remotely controlling weapons across the battlefield, parrying blows meant for Maltz's back and feeling every vibration of the slaughter. Suddenly, Benjamin's consciousness caught a flicker of something else. At the far end of a distant corridor, a lone figure moved with unbelievable speed. His movements were stiff, yet his sword never missed. The figure paused. He turned his head, looking directly toward Benjamin's invisible presence. In those eyes burned black and white flames. Benjamin's mind jolted. He tried to reach out to confirm the identity of this mysterious warrior, but Sokka's voice pulled him back. "Barren, on the left, 3. Benjamin snapped back to the immediate chaos, maneuvering his blades to save Maltz once more. When he looked back toward the distant corridor, the figure was gone. Only the fallen remained. He couldn't be sure of what he saw. He could only press on, feeling every roar, every wound, and every hard-won step toward the heart of the darkness. That gaze, Calvin could sense it. It wasn't the sharp, killing intent of a battlefield, but something distant, a faint light cast from a great, echoing void. He looked back across the corridor, past the surging, roaring tides of the dead. There he saw them, a man in ceremonial robes, knights in battered armor, a griffin rider. He recognized that steel, that sword. Maltz. Calvin paused. These were his subordinates, the men he had sent to the capital whose fates had been swallowed by silence. Now Mouth stood amidst the undead, swinging a blood-stained axe with desperate, living fury. He was still alive. The battle was still ongoing. Something stirred within Calvin's cold chest. Pride, regret. In this dead body, emotions were sluggish, vague, but the feeling of being moved was real. Perhaps this was Conrad's final orchestration, a distraction to buy the madman time. Calvin's own body felt stiff, requiring a heavy command for every step, yet death offered strange advantages. He felt no pain when blades bit into his flesh. He felt no fatigue as he fought from one end of the palace to the other. His heartbeat, if it existed at all, remained a constant, hollow rhythm. He swung his axe spear, a master of every weapon he seized, yet he longed for the weight of a greatsword, the true mark of the Kingdom Knight's answer. Suddenly, a figure blocked his path, a knight of the dead encrusted with dark crystals, eyes burning with black and white flames. Calvin knew him, the captain of the 3rd Battalion. They had dueled once in life, now they began their second match. The Deathborn Knight was fast, precise, ruthless. His twin swords carved arcs through the air, forcing Calvin back. As lesser undead swarmed from the shadows, a strike finally shattered Calvin's weapon and sliced deep into his chest. Calvin did not curse, he did not retreat. He dropped the broken shaft, lunged forward, and seized the knight by the shoulders. Then he slammed him down again and again. The stone floor shattered, armor buckled, limbs twisted. On the 6th strike, the Deathborn Knight finally went still. Calvin lifted the man's mask, looking one last time at the ashen face of a former comrade, before crushing the flame beneath his boot. Silence returned. Calvin approached the crystal dome housing the crown of the rising wind. With one punch, the glass exploded. He reached in and grasped the black crown. It was heavy, cold, and utterly silent. No legendary resonance, no light. Maybe it's because I'm not a champion, he thought. He remembered Conrad's words, give it to someone you trust. Naturally, he thought of Princess Celia in the Southern Territory. She was the hero this world needed. But then, a second name surfaced in his mind, a name he had watched, then approved of. Calvin shook his head. Stepping toward the exit, he was a corpse, a vessel for a crown, but as he looked toward the road, he whispered a thought to the shadows. After all, they are people I approve of. Golden threads traced graceful arcs in the dimly lit corridor. With every sweep, the head of a Deathborn rolled away. These threads, fine as silk yet sharper than steel, extended from Sokka's fingertips like a deadly extension of his will. Barren, Sokka whispered inwardly, his tone deceptively gentle. Are you thinking about something? Benjamin's voice crackled through their mental connection, heavy with hesitation. He spoke of another warrior, a lone figure tearing through the palace at impossible speeds, carving a path through the undead. Sokka paused, his threads momentarily still. One person. One person, Benjamin confirmed. The dead ones cannot stop him. Sokka fell silent, then resumed his grim harvest. I would like to help, but there is nothing I can do at this moment. The cost of their journey was steep. Of the 13 who began this mission, only 6 remained. They finally reached their destination, a vast, hollowed-out warehouse filled with mountains of cold, gleaming dust crystals. This is the secret, Sokka realized, the source of the endless undead. Benjamin remained silent. He knew these crystals were a potent energy source, but using them to resurrect the dead, it was madness. Sokka's gaze hardened as he surveyed the room. The factory where they are created is further in, but to go there is to choose death. Our target is here, these crystals. Suddenly, a heavy thud shook the chamber. Thump asterisk. Thump thump asterisk. The undead were battering the gate. The hinges groaned under the weight of a surging, dark mass. They were surrounded. There was nowhere left to run. Sokka looked at his 6 weary soldiers, their faces etched with fear, yet waiting for his command. He began to pile the crystal bags together. Sokka, Benjamin's voice rose in a panicked shout. What are you doing? You wouldn't choose to self-destruct here. Answer me. Sokka straightened up, looking at the door as it began to splinter. Barren, I hope you will witness this day. Stop talking nonsense, Benjamin interrupted, his voice urgent. Put the crystals down and run as far as you can. I will detonate them remotely with my mind blades. Just get out of the blast radius. A faint, invisible smile touched Sokka's lips. How could I doubt you? He signaled the survivors, withdraw. They scrambled through a side passage just as the gates burst open. Sokka pushed his speed to the limit, weaving a golden barrier behind them as they sprinted away from the impending hell. Then the world ended in sound. Benjamin triggered the explosion. A deafening roar louder than anything the capital had ever heard ripped through the palace. The ground buckled. A massive corner of the fortress was torn apart, shooting rubble and orange flames into the blackened sky. The shockwave slammed into Sokka, shattering his golden shield and throwing him violently into the dirt. He lay in the rubble, ears ringing, vision blurred, but he was alive, and so were the 6 men behind him. Sokka looked at the smoke-filled sky and laughed, a hoarse, breathless sound of pure relief. "It seems you saved me again." "Enough nonsense," Benjamin panted, exhausted from the mental strain. "As long as you are alive, that is enough." Sokka stood, shaking the dust from his cloak. The mountain of crystals was gone, the undead's lifeline was severed. He looked toward the burning ruins and whispered, "Barren, I have witnessed this day." "Me too," Benjamin replied. Sokka helped his warriors to their feet, their eyes burned with the fire of survivors. "Let's go," Sokka said firmly. "It's not over yet." Together, they disappeared into the smoke. The door opened with a soft creak, but Benjamin heard it. He didn't move. He remained slumped in his chair, a drained, lifeless mess, while sunlight spilled across the piles of files on his desk. Chesvia stood in the doorway, an eyebrow arched in amusement. She stepped inside, her chair groaning as she sat opposite him. "Looking at you," she teased, "you must have been on another long-distance call with that bishop in the capital." Benjamin's finger twitched, but he stayed hidden behind his palm. His voice was a muffled, hoarse rasp. "They went to save the world." He let out a bitter breath. "Do all religious people have self-destructive tendencies? They are always thinking about exploding." Chesvia didn't offer a polite chuckle. She gave a genuine laugh. "If it doesn't explode, wouldn't the religion be a waste of faith?" Her tone then shifted, turning sharp and serious. "My advice, stay away from those weirdos." Benjamin finally sat up, though he still exuded an aura of total exhaustion. He tried to deflect, steering the conversation toward a light-hearted argument about a web novel titled *X Time Moon*, but Chesvia eventually cut him off. "Chatting time is over," she said, her focus snapping back to work. "Little Ben, sit up straight." She began her report. The books recovered from the resurrection facilities in Holy Spring territory were mostly gone, purified by fire. However, she continued with a small smile, "we now know this is the 8th facility, and we obtained fresh goddess blood." Benjamin leaned in, his interest piqued. Chesvia explained that she had successfully synthesized what the church calls holy blood, and her version was even more potent. "Can I use it?" Benjamin asked, a spark finally returning to his eyes. "I want to try the 10,000 swords returned to one technique." "I knew you'd say that," she replied. "I'll give you the best." The mood grew heavy again as they discussed the next phase. The dead had been cleared from the fallen princes, and Benjamin was preparing to station troops before heading to the southern border. Chesvia watched him closely, her voice softening. "If your goals don't meet expectations, you're getting serious, aren't you?" The air in the room seemed to freeze. "We don't need a southern border that can only stand by and watch," Benjamin replied. There was no madness in his eyes, only a cold, clear resolve. If his former comrades stood against him, he would act, not out of anger, but because it had to be done. Chesvia sighed, standing to leave. "All right, I'll hurry with the blood, so you won't be laughed at if you fail your sword technique." Benjamin's lips twitched into a faint, tired smile. "Then I'm counting on you." Dust billowed on the horizon, catching the eyes of every resident in Holy Spring City. It was the banner of Frost Town leading a procession that stretched as far as the eye could see. This was no ragtag militia, it was a battle-tested army. At the head of the column sat Walter, the military minister and Benjamin's most trusted knight. With a simple longsword at his waist, he led his men through the city gates in perfect, rhythmic silence. Inside the cathedral's temporary office, Benjamin watched from the window with a faint smile. "They're here," he whispered. The door swung open and Walter entered, immediately dropping to one knee with his fist pressed to his chest. "My lord," he rumbled, "your knight reports for duty." Benjamin stepped forward to help him up, a touch of humor breaking the tension. "When did you learn this trick?" Walter straightened, his expression turning serious. "Minister Sullivan said one should act the part. I thought he had a point." The two men sat and the air in the room sharpened. Benjamin laid out his vision. Holy Spring territory was to become a second Frost town, a fortress to guard against the church forces to the east. But when Benjamin revealed his own plans to travel south to find Princess Celia and Finn, Walter's resolve hardened. "I hope to go south with you," Walter insisted. Benjamin countered, explaining he needed someone he could trust to hold this ground, but Walter would not be moved. "You must have an army with you," the knight declared. "This concerns your safety and your dignity, and the commander of that army can be no one but me." Benjamin looked at his old friend, the man who had stood by him from the bloody battles of Stone Tooth Pass to the siege of the Dead Ones. He saw the unwavering confidence in Walter's eyes and finally nodded. "Okay, take your best men, the rest will stay to guard the territory." Before leaving, Walter delivered a message from Dianatho, who remained at Fallenbrook. "He has complete confidence," Walter said, "that you will pull Lord Finn out of this mess. He has an almost blind trust in you." Benjamin turned back to the window, watching the banners flutter in the wind. The southern border awaited, along with questions that had no easy answers. "Walter," Benjamin called out, "we depart in 3 days." "Clear," Walter replied. At the door he paused. "D1 last time, Lord Diona is right, you will bring him out." The door clicked shut, leaving Benjamin alone with the weight of the journey ahead. The night was already deep when Livia stood before Benjamin's office. She took a long, steadying breath, then gently knocked. "Come in." The room was bathed in the dim, flickering glow of an oil lamp. Benjamin sat behind a desk overflowing with documents, only looking up as she approached. "You're here," he said, gesturing to the chair. "Sit down." Livia obeyed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Why had he called her here alone at such an hour? Her fingers tightened nervously against her knees. Benjamin set his papers aside. "I want to ask you for a favor. I hope you can convey some words to Percival." Livia blinked, stunned. "Pa, Percival?" "Yes, my third brother, the one still in jail." Benjamin leaned back, noticing her hesitation. "Is something wrong?" "No, no," she replied, perhaps a bit too quickly. "I'd be happy to help, very happy." Benjamin explained his reasoning. He was heading south and needed a capable, easily replaceable bodyguard. Percival was the logical choice. Hearing this, Livia leaned forward, her voice eager. "Actually, I can too." "You can't do it," Benjamin interrupted firmly. "You are neither idle, nor will you be replaced." He locked eyes with her. "You are important." The words caught in Livia's throat, her cheeks flushed in the shadows. "Is it important to you?" she whispered. "You can think that way too," he replied. He added that Percival respected her and that the message would be better received coming from her than from him. Livia stood, her composure regained. "No problem at all, I'll go right now." "No need to rush," Benjamin said softly. "Let's do it tomorrow, it is already very late." As Livia stepped out into the darkness, her footsteps were lighter than they had been in weeks. The next day, deep within the underground sanctuary, the labor reform was in full swing. Percival, once a proud knight, was squatting in the dirt, repairing a broken wall with mortar and stone. "Percival!" He froze at the sound of the familiar voice. Turning, he saw Livia. "None," he grunted, looking away. "Percival," she said, her voice dropping to a serious tone, "your chance to make amends has come. Benjamin is heading south, and he wants you to go with him." Percival snapped upright, mortar dripping from his hands. "What? He's trying to humiliate me. He locks me up, forces me into menial labor, and now he wants me to follow him like a servant." Livia didn't argue, she simply watched him. Her gaze was cold, devoid of anger, pity, or warmth. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that eventually withered Percival's rage. "Sister," he stammered. "Are you done talking?" Livia took a single step forward. "I have been watching you, Percival. I've watched you work, watched you study, and watched you sit alone at night. I thought you would understand by now." She leaned in closer. "If he wanted to humiliate you, he would have left you to rot. Instead, he gave you space to rethink. He gave you a purpose." She paused, her eyes piercing his soul. "Percival, do not let me down again." A jolt went through him. He looked at the woman he had always revered, seeing a steel in her he had never noticed before. He lowered his head in genuine submission. "Yes, ma'am." Livia nodded once, turned and walked away. A fellow knight crept up to Percival, whispering in awe, "What did you do to offend her? I've never seen her like that. She was terrifying." Percival didn't look up from the wall. He simply picked up his trowel and said, "That's because you don't know enough about her." Percival stayed up all night. He plastered and patched the wall again and again, until the moonlight moved from one end of the corridor to the other, until the sky began to lighten. Only when the last crack was filled and the surface was as smooth as new did he finally stop. He stood there looking at the flat, featureless stone. It looked like things that never happened. Satisfied, he leaned against the wall and fell into a heavy sleep. The next day, sunlight streamed through the gaps in the dome, cutting patches of light across the ground. Percival woke, stretched his stiff neck, and began packing his pitifully small fortune. A sword with a worn scabbard, a change of clothes, and a pale, worn-out doctrine. That was all. His Templar knight plate armor had been confiscated the day he was imprisoned, but as he touched his coarse cloth robe, he felt no discomfort. He walked toward the prison door. The guard simply nodded and led him through the dark passage, heading upward. The sudden sunlight stung his eyes. As he adjusted, he looked around Holy Spring City. It was normal. There were no troops, no oppression. Shops were open and children were laughing on the street corners. Benjamin's army had not brought the bad things he had expected. "Percival." He turned to see Rinaldo leaning against a wall. When Percival asked if he was coming along, Rinaldo shook his head. He had to watch over the territory. He looked at Percival with rare seriousness. "Do you know the difference between you and Benjamin? He can see what's important, and you can't." Percival gripped his bundle tightly. Rinaldo's tone softened. "You made the right choice last night. Take this opportunity to look away from the church and look elsewhere." With those final words, Rinaldo disappeared around the corner. That evening, Chesvia found Benjamin on the city wall, watching the sunset. She handed him a small box containing 3 glass tubes of pale red liquid, an improved version of holy blood. "It will enhance your mind blade," she explained, "because I am a genius." Benjamin chuckled, tucking the gift away. They stood together in the orange glow. Benjamin asked quietly if their friends, Celia and Finn, could ever go back to how they were. "No," Chesvia replied calmly. "The past is the past, but you can move forward." Benjamin looked at her. "And you, would you like to walk forward with me?" Chesvia paused, the setting sun catching her silvery hair. "Nonsense," she finally spoke. "Otherwise, what would I be doing here?" The setting sun cast a warm, amber glow upon Princess Celia, illuminating her pale pink hair as she stared north toward the green riverlands. Martha, the head lady-in-waiting, watched from a distance, knowing better than to disturb her. 3 days ago, Celia had made a cold, calculated decision. She abandoned the grueling war against Finn's guerrillas, leaving behind supplies, outposts, and the lives of her soldiers to return to Grand Duke Upton of the South. Martha expected the princess to be broken. After all, Finn was a former comrade, a friend from her days in the hero's party. But Celia did not weep. Instead, she marched into the Grand Duke's council chamber and emerged half a day later with total military authority. Upton, that old, cunning fox, had surrendered his power to her. When Martha asked how she had managed it, Celia's gaze was chillingly hollow. No pride, no weariness, just a flat, terrifying calm. "He needs me," Celia said simply. "He knows he cannot defend this land alone." In that moment, Martha saw a shadow of the crown prince, Alcaia, a born ruler who could silence a room with a single glance. In the days that followed, Celia became a force of nature. She ambushed the Deadborn army with lethal precision and crushed 3 rebel factions within 72 hours, mounting the leaders' heads upon the city walls. The gossips who once called her a childish hero now stood in trembling silence. Martha felt a surge of pride, even thanking Finn's rebellion for forcing Celia to become this ruthless, efficient leader. But Martha could not see the silent war raging inside the princess's mind. It began as a whisper, a soft, rhythmic sound like the wind. Then the voice became clear. "You did a great job," it murmured. "Leave everything to me." Celia had tried to resist, but she was so incredibly tired. The voice became her crutch. It offered the correct choices when she hesitated. It told her to abandon the Riverlands. It told her how to intimidate the Duke. Every time she listened, she became more successful and less herself. As the sun finally sank below the horizon, Celia turned from the wall. Her movements were steady, her posture perfect. As she walked toward the castle, the voice whispered one last time, "Look how satisfied they are. If things continue like this, everything will be all right." Celia did not respond. She simply stepped out of the light and into the waiting dark. On the day of departure, a fine, scattered snow began to fall from leaden clouds, dusting the carriage roof and the soldier's armor. Inside the spacious cabin, Benjamin sat in comfort, leaning against soft tea cushions with a warm brazier at his side. He lifted the curtain, watching his men trudge through the muddy slush, their horses splashing through deep ruts. Sometimes Benjamin wondered if he was enjoying himself a little too much, but he knew that if he tried to share the hardships on foot, his commander, Walter, would simply throw him back inside while the soldiers looked on with annoyance. Still, it was terribly boring. Benjamin turned his gaze toward his companions. Aphrodite leaned back, engrossed in a book of strange tales, a faint smirk on his lips. Near the door, Percival sat rigidly, his brow furrowed over a worn book of doctrine. Benjamin stared at him. He kept staring until Percival finally looked up, his tone stiff. "Why are you looking at me?" "I wasn't," Benjamin replied smoothly, shifting his eyes to Aphrodite. "I was looking at the other one." When Aphrodite ignored him, Benjamin looked back at Percival. "Actually, I just thought, you're benefiting quite a bit from my kindness riding in this fine carriage." Percival's face flushed with suppressed emotion. He stood up to leave, but Benjamin's foot shot out, perfectly blocking the door. "As a guard," Benjamin remarked casually, "you shouldn't abandon your post. I'll have to deduct your salary." Aphrodite let out a sudden laugh, crunching loudly on a nut. Percival, defeated and unable to refute the logic, sat back down in silence. Eventually, the clouds parted as they reached Golden Ear Valley, the final resupply point before the Southern Territory. There, they were met by Laurent, a former teammate from Benjamin's old adventuring squad. Now a wealthy lord, Laurent looked at Benjamin's disciplined, loyal soldiers with undisguised envy. "How did you gather such men?" Laurent sighed. "My guards are just mercenaries, they only care for gold." "I didn't do much," Benjamin replied. "I just made sure they and their families were well fed and warmly dressed." Once they were alone, Laurent's smile faded, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Benjamin, I see the other commune troops moving. Are you going to the southern border to start a war?" "That is the worst-case scenario," Benjamin said calmly. Laurent turned pale. The boy who once carried their bags was now speaking of revolution. "Laurent," Benjamin interrupted, his voice firm, "I have my plans, you don't need to get involved, but if my men need to pass through here, you must make way for them." The deal was struck. Laurent had accepted Benjamin's request, but as the snowy night settled around them, the air grew heavy with an unspoken tension. They were tied to the same chariot now, and there was no turning back. Laurent sighed, his breath hitching in the cold air as he looked at Benjamin. "By the way," he began, his voice dropping an octave, "I have a problem, one I need your help with." Benjamin raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Bandits," Laurent spat, the words sounding like they were ground between his teeth. "A gang of refugees and deserters from the southern border. They've plundered villages, towns, and my own caravan. 3 times, Benjamin, 3 times they've hit me. 20 men dead, the goods gone, and I am losing money hand over fist." Benjamin's gaze was cool, almost mocking. "Your army cannot defeat a pack of bandits." Laurent's face flushed a deep crimson. "It is not that we cannot beat them, it is that we cannot catch them. They are slippery, they hit, they run, and they vanish into the mountains before we even draw steel." He cleared his throat, trying to regain his dignity. "They require a different approach, and you have experience with this sort of thing." Benjamin let out a long, slow sigh. "Fine, give me their location, tell me you've at least figured that much out." "If I hadn't," Laurent replied with a flicker of relief, "I might as well step down as lord right now." The intelligence was grim, 3 coordinated teams, one to loot, one to ambush, and one to move supplies. They had a strategist leading them, and a mole in Laurent's ranks. "We don't have time to hunt spies," Benjamin declared, spreading the maps across the table. "We strike all 3 groups simultaneously. Walter, take your men east, block their retreat into the mountains." Walter nodded firmly. "Consider it done." "Laurent," Benjamin continued, "you lead the frontal assault, make a show of it, be loud, make them believe you are the only threat." "And you?" Laurent asked, his brow furrowing. Benjamin's finger landed on the map with a dull thud. I will infiltrate their stronghold. Lauren recoiled. That's suicide if something happens to you. I value my life, Lauren, Benjamin interrupted, a thin smile playing on his lips. He gestured behind him to where Percival leaned against the wall and Aphrodite idly examined the decor. That is why I am bringing them. They are enough. Before dawn, the three teams vanished into the winter mist. In the silent, snow-covered forest, Benjamin led the way toward the bandits' lair. Behind him, Percival gripped his sword, his eyes scanning the tree line with wary intensity. Bringing up the rear was Aphrodite, stepping as lightly as if he were on a casual stroll through a garden. Are you sure this is the way? Percival whispered, his voice barely a ripple in the cold air. It is what the report says, Benjamin replied without looking back. The intelligence could be a lie, Percival countered. Benjamin's voice was dry. That is why I brought the two of you. If it is a trap, at least someone can hold them off. Percival's face darkened, but from the back, Aphrodite let out a soft, melodic chuckle. Don't worry, darling, the lithe man whispered. If it's a fake, I'll fish you both out with my thorns. The mountain road became narrower and narrower as they walked, until the path nearly vanished. Benjamin stopped, his eyes tracing the silhouette of two low hills that formed a jagged N. Arrow Valley, the entrance was a mess of tangled bushes, their branches bent low under the heavy weight of the snow. This is it, Benjamin whispered, his voice barely a breath. Percival immediately gripped the hilt of his sword, while Aphrodite's expression shifted, her eyes turning sharp and serious. There is smoke deep in the valley, Aphrodite said softly. It is faint, but it is definitely cooking smoke. Against the gray, oppressive sky, wisps of white rose from the depths. Benjamin nodded. They are right here, waiting for us to wipe them all out. Percival frowned, his voice low with suspicion. Could it be a trap? Possibly, Benjamin replied. Everyone stay on your guard. Behind them, the soldiers of Frosttown stood like statues in the snow. Their breath condensed into thick white mist, yet not a single soul made a sound. With a series of sharp hand gestures, Benjamin signaled the strike. Two squads silently broke away, disappearing into the hillside brush to secure the high ground. The rest gripped their weapons, eyes locked on the valley floor. Benjamin turned to his companions. You two come with me. If there is a trap, you are responsible for stepping on it. Percival's brow furrowed. Can you not put it another way? No, Benjamin said flatly. Let us go. The team moved forward in a tense, heavy silence. The snow muffled their footsteps, but it could not mask the pounding of Benjamin's heart. They pushed through the final thicket, and the view suddenly opened up. Benjamin froze. These were not the ruthless bandits he had envisioned. Scattered across the valley were people huddled in twos and threes. Their clothes were tattered rags, many were wrapped in bandages stained with dark, frozen dirt. Weapons lay discarded in the slush. There was no fire in their eyes, only the hollow stare of the defeated. Someone was coughing, someone was groaning, but mostly there was only the silence of despair. This is not what I expected, Aphrodite whispered, stepping up beside Benjamin. If we move now, we win without a price. This does not feel like a trap. What are your thoughts? Benjamin did not answer immediately. He looked at their gear, messy, yes, but bearing the unmistakable style of the private soldiers of the southern nobles. His mind raced. Lauren would not lie about the threat, so if these men were once elite, what had broken them? He squinted, his decision hardening like ice. Continue. Percival hesitated. Continue. Continue, Benjamin repeated, his tone cold and flat. He drew his sword, the steel singing as it left the sheath. Let us do it. The soldiers of Frosttown charged like a pack of wolves. Shouts of battle shattered the valley's silence, but there was no true fight. The remnants of the Southern Army didn't stand their ground, they ran. Benjamin moved with lethal precision. He knocked an arrow into his elven bow, drew back the string, and released. Thrum, the arrow struck a resisting man in the shoulder. Another arrow followed, then another, systematically suppressing anyone who still held a blade. The battle was over in minutes. The valley was now filled with prisoners, forced to kneel in rows in the blood-stained snow. Benjamin strode toward the center of the crowd, where a man was pinned to the earth by two guards. The man's right knee was shattered, broken by Percival, yet he still thrashed against the dirt. Benjamin looked down at the mud-caked face of the leader. The The man was young, perhaps in his early 30s, his eyes burning with resentment. "Are you the leader here?" Benjamin asked. The man spat into the snow. "If we had been given a few more days, the outcome would have been completely different." Benjamin leaned in, his gaze piercing. "I reserve my opinion on that. I am just curious. How could a knight of the southern borders stoop so low as to become a bandit in the royal domain?" The man's pupils contracted. Benjamin's voice dropped to a dangerous silkiness. "Do you no longer care for your knightly honor?" Benjamin waited at the edge of the valley, the silence of the snow broken only by the rhythmic thud of approaching hooves. Walter returned from the east, leading a grim procession of dejected prisoners. These were no mere refugees. Walter pointed to their worn, high-quality half-armor, the unmistakable gear of southern soldiers. "It is resolved," Walter stated calmly. He noted a strange detail. The enemy had used guerrilla tactics, encirclement and feigned retreats, though they only grasped the basics. Before Benjamin could process this, a second group arrived. Lauren and his men appeared, disheveled, wounded, and visibly frustrated. "They are like eels," Lauren spat, his voice rising in anger. "They run when we chase and hide when we stop." Benjamin offered a dry, sarcastic smile, wondering aloud why only Lauren's unit had struggled so much. Later, as the camp settled into a heavy quiet, the two men spoke privately. Benjamin shared his suspicion. These men looked less like bandits and more like a defeated army. Lauren nodded grimly. He explained that the iron-blooded princess had crushed a southern rebellion with terrifying speed, reclaiming territories and purging the nobility. These soldiers were the remnants, men with nowhere to go, fleeing north to survive. "Do you think they have anything to do with Finn?" Benjamin asked. Lauren hesitated. "I cannot say, but I will never accept a new power regrouping in my territory, not even if it is Finn's doing." Driven by a growing unease, Benjamin began the interrogations. The truth slowly emerged from the fragmented testimonies of the prisoners. These were indeed rebels from the south, led by a veteran of the Green Shade River, a survivor of a decimated guerrilla unit. Their singular goal: revenge. Revenge against the princess, against Upton, and against anyone who supported the destruction of their old lives. Benjamin felt a flicker of relief that these raids weren't directly ordered by Finn, at least not yet. But the realization was still chilling. If Finn began to harness this desperate flame of vengeance, if he started incorporating these broken remnants into a new army, then Benjamin's journey south would be far more dangerous than he ever imagined. He realized then that his old friend might already be walking a very different and much darker path. The snow continues to fall, a fine, cold, light powder that sends a shiver down the spine. Through the silent mountains and skeletal forests, 23 people trudge in disordered haste. They are led by Herman, a man forged in the hunger and fire of the Green Riverlands. Once a guerrilla fighter alongside the legendary Finn, Herman now harbors a heart blackened by a singular purpose: revenge. He despises the kingdom. He loathes the nobility who drink wine in warm castles while his comrades rot in the mud. When his men ask for direction, Herman points north toward a wealthy, defenseless village. He has already optimized his group, leaving the weak and the hesitant to die in the drifts. He believes he is the spark that will ignite a wildfire of refugees and broken soldiers across the land. But then he stops. A figure stands in the path. It is not a man, but a creature clad in tattered armor and encrusted with black crystals. Its face is ashen, and its eyes burn with terrifying black and white flames. A born dead. "Grab your weapons," Herman commands, but it is already too late. The creature moves with invisible speed. In a blur of steel, heads are severed and blood stains the snow a glaring, brilliant red. Herman lunges, driving his blade into the creature's chest, but the monster doesn't even flinch. It catches the bare blade with its hand, clamping it like an iron vise, and looks at Herman with eyes full of cold contempt. With a casual flick, the creature wrests the sword away and drives it through Herman's own chest. As the rebel leader lies dying in the cold, he watches the monster walk away, heading toward the very village Herman intended to plunder. His final thought is a bitter realization: fate was never on his side. Meanwhile, miles away at the Golden Valley camp, a different journey begins. Benjamin stands by his carriage, bidding farewell to Lauren. A letter is tucked into Benjamin's coat, a reply from the formidable Celia. "She is willing to see me," Benjamin says quietly. Lauren offers a warning, admitting he has grown afraid of the woman Celia has become. Benjamin simply nods, claiming a bravery his friend lacks. He boards the carriage, the wheels crunching softly over the fresh snow as the procession begins its long, slow march toward the south and toward a meeting that will change everything. The carriage moved slowly along the frozen road, its wheels making a soft, rustling sound as they rolled over the fresh snow. Inside, Lord Benjamin Blackwood sat in silence, folding a letter he had already read several times. The words were from Celia, a fellow member of the heroic squad. She spoke of her joy regarding his arrival in the South, but her tone felt wrong. She claimed she was delayed by petty people and insignificant bugs that required her personal attention. In her absence, she had instructed a man named Lord Upton to entertain them in Hurricane City. Benjamin leaned back, his gaze fixed on the carriage roof. The letter made him deeply uncomfortable. Finished reading, Aphrodite's voice drifted from across the carriage, tinged with a lazy curiosity. Was it well written? Benjamin didn't answer. Seeing his silence, Aphrodite shrugged and returned to staring out the window. Nearby, Percival clutched a tattered, pale book of doctrine. His eyes weren't moving across the pages. He was listening, too. "We're almost there," Benjamin said suddenly. "Hurricane City." He turned his gaze toward Aphrodite. "Tell me, how do you imagine Lord Upton will greet us?" Aphrodite raised an eyebrow, leaning back with a mischievous grin. "Since we are imagining, why not be bold? I see a grand banquet. We alight at the city gate, our path paved with roses and lilies blooming in the snow, crowds lining the streets, waving ribbons and chanting your name." Benjamin offered a dry smile. "You're very ambitious." Percival looked up from his book, his expression cold. "Out of touch with reality," he muttered. When pressed for his own vision, Percival simply grunted. "Go into town, find a hotel, and sleep." "Boring," Benjamin sighed. "That makes me even sleepier." Suddenly, the carriage swayed and came to a complete halt. A knock sounded at the window, followed by the voice of their attendant, Walter. "My lord, there is a situation that requires your judgment." Benjamin stepped out into the biting, post-snowfall air. He looked up and stopped dead. Hurricane City loomed ahead, its grayish-white walls majestic under the winter sun, but it wasn't the architecture that caught his eye, it was the army. Thousands of soldiers stood in neat ranks, their black armor stark against the white snow. A forest of silver spears pierced the sky. Above them, banners fluttered in the wind, each embroidered with a golden rose against a deep blue field. "The Rose Knights," Walter whispered, "the Grand Duke's most elite force." Aphrodite poked his head out, whistling low. "I do like the name." Percival stepped down last, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. "This is the people who will greet us," Benjamin replied, his eyes locked on the steel-clad horizon. The valiant Rose Knights, one of the Grand Duke's most elite forces, stood in a disciplined, silent array to greet the newcomers. This was no mere formality, nor was it open hostility. To Benjamin, it felt like a declaration. In the South, the Knights define the rules. At the end of the line stood their commander, Brynhua, CW. As young, under 30, with an air of arrogance born of high station. Her red armor gleamed blindingly in the winter sun, but its most striking feature was the skirt, a layered bloom of multiple red longswords, hilts up and blades down like lethal petals. Brynhua scrutinized Benjamin with undisguised entitlement. "Baron Blackwood," she stated flatly, "by order of the Duke, we are here to welcome you. Hurricane City has prepared a camp for your men." Benjamin did not lower himself. He simply nodded with a dismissive, "Thank you for your trouble," and strode past her. Walter followed, pausing only to drop a cold reminder in his usual steady tone. "The Baron is a distinguished guest of both the Grand Duke and the Princess. Your manners could be a little more formal." Brynhua's expression froze as the Frosttown soldiers filed past her. By nightfall, Benjamin was settled into a luxurious 3-story mansion near the Grand Duke's castle. While his soldiers were stationed in barracks by the city walls, the arrangement was reasonable. Too many foreign troops in the city center would look like a coup. Brynhua appeared at his door one last time, her tone still businesslike. "The welcome banquet will be held tomorrow. The Grand Duke will meet you in person." Once she departed, the room fell into a heavy silence. Aphrodite warmed his hands by the fire, admitting he had no desire to cross a woman whose decorative swords looked so functional. Percival, ever brooding, noted that Brynhua was likely his equal in combat. Walter entered after securing the perimeter, his frustration simmering. I think I need to remind her who she is talking to, he muttered. Benjamin poured tea for his companions, his voice casual. Perhaps her rank is higher than mine. After all, I am just a baron. Please stop joking, Walter countered, drinking his tea in one gulp. A baron does not receive a personal banquet from the Grand Duke. Benjamin stared into the flickering fireplace, thinking of the annoying insects mentioned in Celia's letter. Tomorrow, he would finally meet the power behind the South. The next day arrived. Breenwa appeared at the mansion gate exactly on time, still clad in her striking red armor. The sword skirt at her waist gleamed brilliantly in the morning light. Her gaze remained haughty, as if Baron Benjamin's request for more formality the day before had never happened. Baron, please, she said coolly. Benjamin followed, accompanied by Aphrodite. Per custom, attendants were permitted inside the Grand Duke's castle, but soldiers were not. Thus, Walter and Percival, clad in heavy plate, remained outside with the guards. They walked through streets of stone illuminated by the dawn, arriving at the massive fortress. The Grand Duke's castle was vast, large enough to house the entire nobility of the southern territory. To reach the third-floor banquet hall, they passed through two heavily guarded gates and climbed a wide stone staircase. Breenwa led the way, her red sword skirt swaying like a moving flower. Benjamin studied the corridor lined with ancient portraits and displays of weaponry, some rusted with age, others gleaming as if fresh from the forge. Behind him, Aphrodite appeared entirely relaxed, eyeing the decorations with idle curiosity. The moment Benjamin stepped into the banquet hall, he felt them. Dozens of eyes landed on him from every direction, scrutinizing, curious, and vigilant. The hall was immense. Long tables were arranged in a horseshoe shape, draped in snow-white linen and laden with silver. Tall candelabras bathed the room in a golden glow, while a massive tapestry depicted the legends of the South. The hum of conversation paused as Benjamin entered. Breenwa led them to a designated spot at the table. Please wait here, she instructed. The Grand Duke will arrive shortly. With a sharp turn, she vanished. Benjamin took his seat. To his left sat Aphrodite. Opposite them were the southern nobles, barons, and viscounts whose names he did not know. Though they resumed their chatter, Benjamin felt their gazes lingering in the shadows, assessing him, waiting. He took a sip of the local red wine. It was mellow and sweet. Not bad, Aphrodite remarked, smacking his lips, though it lacks the kick of Spirit Spring Happy water. Benjamin warned him to drink sparingly. Tell me, Benjamin whispered, why is Breenwa allowed to walk around in armor? Perhaps because she is a noblewoman, Aphrodite replied. Benjamin shook his head. If that were the case, I would have worn my own outfit. It is possible that isn't armor at all, but some strange, sexy fashion popular in the South. Time stretched on. The Grand Duke did not appear. The nobles grew louder, laughing and toasting, yet the tension remained. Finally, the opportunity they were waiting for arrived. A middle-aged nobleman stood and approached Benjamin. He wore a smile, but his eyes were cold. Lord Blackwood, he announced, his voice carrying across the hall, I have long admired your name. Benjamin stood. I dare not accept such praise. The nobleman's smile faded. I have a question, Baron. Why did you bring 200 fully armed soldiers into the southern border? What are your intentions? The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Benjamin. Benjamin did not falter. He put down his glass with a soft asterisk clink and looked the man in the eye. You want to know my intentions? Fine, I will tell you. He took a step forward. First, I am here to notify you. You know the capital has fallen. You know the deadborn are coming. This world is burning east, west, and north. Do you truly think the South will be spared? The nobleman stammered, but Benjamin raised a second finger. Second, I am here to assist. Rebellion, roving bandits, and an army of the dead are at your doorstep. And yet, Benjamin sighed, his voice dripping with disappointment, I expected to see a South Prepa. Ring for war instead. I see. This, you are too slow, so slow that I have lost my patience. The hall was deathly quiet. Benjamin's voice turned cold. I came for a peaceful discussion, but it seems a peaceful conversation is not what you need. Just then, the heavy doors at the end of the hall groaned open. Grand Duke Upton walked out. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, the pace of a man who owns the room. The nobles bowed instantly. Upton ignored them, his eyes fixed solely on Benjamin. "Lord Blackwood," the Duke said, his voice raspy with age, "I heard everything." He signaled a servant to place a chair directly beside Benjamin. He sat, leaning in like an old man sharing a secret. "You think I don't know what they are?" Upton whispered, gesturing to the bowing nobles. "Cowardly, selfish, short-sighted, they fret over marriages while the fire reaches their gates." He looked at Benjamin intensely. "But you are wrong about one thing. You say the South is not moving, but there is movement." Benjamin frowned. "What movement?" Upton leaned closer. "Syria is the movement of the South. Why do you think she can lead an army with such ruthless methods? Who do you think backs her?" The Duke's eyes flashed with a haunting smugness. "It is me. I am old Baron. I lack the energy for these power struggles, so I found someone to handle the trouble for me. Syria is that person." He watched Benjamin's reaction closely. "Now that you know the truth, what do you think?" In an instant, countless thoughts surged through Benjamin's mind. He's showing off. That was the first realization. Grand Duke Upton was flaunting his control, showing Benjamin that he owned Celia, that he could command a princess, and that every success she had achieved was merely a move on his chessboard. Benjamin's palms tightened. He fought to let reason prevail. He wanted to believe Celia was happy, that she had chosen this life. But as he looked at Upton's arrogant, wrinkled face, a wave of disgust washed over him. The girl who once fought by his side, the princess who held 2 golden shields, was now bound to this old man's cold calculations. "What would you think?" Upton asked again. His voice was deep, composed, and heavy with the certainty of a man who expects his opponent to crumble. The nobles leaned in. The entire banquet hall held its breath, waiting for the Baron of Frostone to show panic or unease. Benjamin looked him in the eye. He began. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "I think the Southern Territory is doomed." Upton's expression froze. The wrinkles on his face seemed to turn to stone. Confusion, then doubt flickered in his eyes. "I'm getting old," Benjamin's voice rang out, louder now, cutting through the stillness. "Can't you hear me? I said, I think the Southern Territory is doomed." Upton's face darkened with a dangerous intensity. He opened his mouth to speak, but Benjamin interjected. "Are you trying to say I'm talk?" Nonsense, that I'm under too much pressure." He took a casual sip of wine from a glass offered by Aphrodite. No, I'm perfectly sober, and this isn't pressure at all." "You don't actually think a few minutes of chatter would make me lose my temper, do you?" Benjamin stood up, straightening his clothes. He no longer needed to feign politeness. He could sense the 4 divinely favored beings in the room and the 44 guards stationed at the doors. He felt the 3 tubes of holy blood in his pocket. He was ready. "Grand Duke," Benjamin said, his voice growing cold, "I don't care who is backing Celia. I don't care if she is your pawn or your tool. All I know is she is my friend. She traveled across the continent and did things that deserve to be remembered." He stepped closer, his gaze sharpening into a blade. "A person can be manipulated. They can be used as a tool, but as long as she has her own will, she can break free. I didn't come here to watch you show off, Upton. I came to the southern border to see her, and I will see her in person." A heavy thud echoed against the stone slabs as a tall guard stepped forward behind Upton. A silent, rhythmic warning. Upton raised a hand and the guard froze. "Lord Blackwood," Upton's voice rumbled deep and low, "you really have a lot to say." Benjamin's smile didn't flicker. "I still have a lot on my mind that I haven't said yet." Upton's eyes narrowed. "Do you know where you are? Do you know who you're talking to?" Benjamin nodded slowly. "I know. I am in the weakest of the kingdom's 4 regions, the south, where you control less than half the territory." He paused, his voice turning sharp and mocking. "And I am speaking with an old man about to be buried, who is still trying to say pretentious things." The room went ice cold. Upton's aged face froze, his wrinkles turning to stone. Around them, the nobles gasped. A wine glass slipped from a trembling hand, shattering against the carpet, crash, splattering crimson liquid everywhere. Beside Benjamin, Aphrodite let out a soft, warning cough, a silent plea for him to stop. But Benjamin ignored her. Upton's face flushed a violent red before turning deathly pale. For years, no one, not even the king, had dared speak to the Grand Duke of the South with such blatant disrespect. "Celia," Upton's voice was no longer calm, it was a jagged edge. When she came here, she had nothing, no army, no money, no supporters. I gave her the opportunity, I gave her the power. This is called cooperation. This is called the rules of the world. He was panting now, like an old man losing an argument on a street corner. Benjamin waited. He waited until Upton's chest stopped heaving. Then he spoke softly. Do you think she did all of this willingly? If it were her choice, what right would I have to be angry for her? What right would I have to stand here? Upton's breathing steadied. Then why turn a nice banquet into this? Benjamin broke into an exaggerated, arrogant smile. Because I'm not here for Celia, I'm here for myself. I just can't stand it. She's wasting her time in this damn lousy place. The nobles sat like frozen statues. Guards gripped their weapons. Manhwa stepped forward, her red armor gleaming in the candlelight, her hand hovering near her sword. What? Benjamin challenged, his gaze sweeping the room. Make your move, kill me, and you provoke the royal domain. It will only hasten your defeat. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. Try to be clear-headed, Duke. Think about who I am and how you should face me. Upton's pupils contracted. In that instant, he saw it, not a loyal friend of Celia, but a man of undisguised ambition. Slowly, Upton released his grip on his chair. You may all step back, he commanded. The guards hesitated, but Upton's authority was absolute. Step back. As the soldiers retreated, Upton looked at Benjamin for a long, silent moment. What is it you want to talk about? Benjamin's smile deepened. That's more like it. The carriage rumbled slowly through the cobblestone streets of Hurricane City. Outside, dusk had settled, and wisps of chimney smoke merged into a darkening sky. But inside, the air was thick with the warmth of a charcoal heater and the weight of unspoken thoughts. Benjamin leaned back against the cushions, his eyes closed, until Aphrodite finally broke the silence. What happened to you just now? He complained, his voice laced with frustration. We were having a good chat, then Upton starts throwing a tantrum. I was posing, getting ready for a fight, and then you two just start talking again. Benjamin opened his eyes, a hint of helplessness in his gaze. Is it my fault? Upton kept bringing up Syria, making me sound like some naive youth driven only by passion and friendship. If I had played along, I would have looked as foolish as him. I suppose that makes sense, Aphrodite mused, striking a thoughtful pose, but you turned those nobles pale. That, Benjamin hummed softly, is because they have never seen the world. From the other side of the carriage, Percival's voice cut through. I don't care what happened inside, but we are being followed. He gestured behind them. 6 men, 3 different groups since we left the castle. Aphrodite peered out the small rear window. Should we deal with them? Let them follow, Benjamin waved a hand dismissively. When we arrive, tie them up and send them back to Upton. Tell him his men are unprofessional and he should be more careful next time. As the carriage continued, Benjamin's mind drifted back to the banquet. Upton's intentions were clear now. He only cared for the safety of the South. To him, the royal territory was merely a piece of meat to be guarded from enemies. When Benjamin suggested an attack on the capital, Upton refused, claiming his army could not leave the border. It was a boring answer. Indeed, exactly what Benjamin expected. There is something bothering me, Benjamin said suddenly. Syria is in the Taiga Hills quelling a small incursion. She went there voluntarily. Aphrodite's brow furrowed. The Taiga Hills. Yes, Benjamin replied, his voice dropping. The Earth Mother Temple is there, the facility for restoring the goddess's womb. She should be on her way back by now, but I do not like this coincidence. Miles away, at the edge of the rolling hills, the ancient temple stood half submerged in the earth. Syria stood before the entrance, her pale pink hair ruffling in the cold wind. Behind her, dozens of terrified believers lay broken on the ground, but she didn't notice them. She felt dazed. She had come here on a whim, drawn by a pull she couldn't explain. Benjamin is coming to see me, she thought, a subtle tension rising in her chest. Go inside, a gentle voice whispered in her mind. It was a voice she had grown used to, a voice that felt like her own. Take your things carefully, then we go to see him with a surprise. Syria didn't hesitate. She stepped into the darkness of the temple as the wind grew stronger, leaving the world of men behind. Ella has been at the front lines for 21 days now. She did not come empty-handed. From Ironforge and Pascal's territory, she brought 3,000 well-trained soldiers, 200 new dust crystal crossbows, and 10 cartloads of explosives manufactured under her personal supervision. These supplies sit piled in the center of the camp, guarded day and night under heavy tarpaulins. Her arrival changed everything. The exhausted warriors of Stone Cliff and the holy war troops no longer have to fill the gaps in the line with their own bodies. Now, when the explosives detonate with a deafening boom, the monsters who feel no pain finally experience the sensation of being blown into the sky. It is expensive, miserably so. With every blast, Ella feels as though she is burning money, but when she sees the lives saved by the fire, she knows it is worth it. Since Calvin's disappearance, the weight of command has rested solely on her shoulders. She has no time to mourn. She spends her days recruiting, demanding funds, and threatening the hesitant members of the commune. "If I can't hold on," she tells them, "you'll be next." It is a grim tactic, but it works. She is waiting for a signal from Benjamin in the south. She dreams of the moment he says, "It's okay," so she can finally launch the counterattack to reclaim every slaughtered village. But tonight, the dream turns into a nightmare. The campsite is silent, the firelight casting long, flickering shadows against the tents. A young soldier, recently arrived with the reinforcements, sits by the embers. He is no longer afraid of the deadborn. He has seen them fall just like any other man. As he prepares to sleep, he hears a strange sound from inside a tent, a low, meaningless muttering. He lifts the flap, peering into the gloom. "Is anyone unwell?" he asks. No response. He reaches out to pat a comrade's shoulder. The man turns, and the soldier's heart freezes. Those are not human eyes, they are burning with black and white flames. Black crystals are erupting from under the skin like flowers blooming in hell. Before he can scream, the thing lunges. Suddenly, the camp is a chorus of terror. Shouts rise from every direction. "They've gone mad, they've gone mad." The men you shared bread with only hours ago are now pouncing from the shadows. No one knows how it started, or who changed first. There is only chaos, only the flickering firelight illuminating distorted faces, and the screams echoing into a night that will never be forgotten. Ella had a dream, a wonderful dream. In this vision, there were no dead, no battle lines, and no exhausting reports. There was only the warm crackle of firewood and the familiar faces of the brave squad. Celia stood over a map, her voice clear and strong as she debated strategy with Finn. They argued, as they always did, but without the old bitterness. Livia walked by with a smile, offering pastries to soften the tension, while Lawrence sat in the corner, grumbling over a mountain of supply forms. Then, the door swung open. Hill strode in, smugly announcing 4,000 elite troops from the north, followed by Calvin, who leaped into the room with a defiant shout, "I'm not dead yet." And then there was him. He sat beside Ella, speaking of a future beyond politics, of traveling the world together. He reached out his hand, his eyes locked onto hers. Their fingers were just about to touch when the dream shattered. "Young miss." Clement was shaking her, his face etched with a rare, heavy anxiety. Ella's anger at being woken vanished the moment she stepped outside. The camp was a nightmare. Tents were overturned, campfires scattered, and the air was thick with the sound of blades clashing against inhuman roars. "What is happening?" she whispered. Clement's voice was grim. "Some have turned, they became the dead, right in their tents." Panic surged. Ella was no commander. Her legs shook and her heart hammered against her ribs. She felt the urge to give up until she thought of Benjamin. He was in the south, fighting, waiting for good news. She could not let him return to a fallen front. Her trembling stopped, her jaw tightened. "Clement," she commanded, her composure cold and sudden. "Those who were converted, kill them all, leave no one alive. I will take the responsibility." The night was a blur of blood and exhaustion. Ella swung her sword until her arms screamed, leading a growing group of survivors from tent to tent. They fought until they met the jihadist army in the center of the camp. As the last of the dead fell, the morning light revealed a gruesome sight. The ground was now infested with strange, black crystalline clusters. Gallon the Blue High, Red leader of the Holy War Army, approached her with a grim face. "The goddess has sent a message," he warned. "The goddess of the dead has obtained something important. Things will only get worse from here." Ella brushed the dust and blood from her clothes, looking toward the horizon. "Then let us prepare for the worst," she said. She didn't know what was coming, but she knew she had to hold this line until Benjamin returned. Black Rock Territory had been enjoying a season of unprecedented success. Sometimes, when Gus sits in his lord's chair, he has to pinch his thigh just to make sure he isn't dreaming. It usually hurts terribly, because he pinches himself far too hard. But the prosperity is real. His wife, Elena, is a brilliant woman, and once she realized that Benjamin of Frosttown was just as sharp, the two territories formed a bond that changed everything. Black Rock was suddenly on a fast-moving train toward progress, whether it was the new railways bringing in gold shields and supplies or that. What was it called again? Quick-acting fertilizer, Elena would remind him. That substance was insane. It allowed crops to mature in just over 10 days, a miracle compared to the months it took when Gus was a child. Even in the most dilapidated corners of the territory, life was blooming. When Gus asked about the price of such magic, Elena simply told him she didn't ask. They needed it now. They could worry about the cost when the hunger was gone. Everything was simple. Gus received refugees, trained the strong into soldiers, and sent them out to exterminate the dead. He felt invincible. He felt that even if the western regions attacked this very moment, he could fight back. Then last night happened. Now Gus sits in his castle like a deflated balloon, his head in his hands. He is broken not by pain but by confusion. His people, his loyal soldiers, didn't die on a battlefield. They died in their sleep. They died in the safest place imaginable. I don't understand, he murmurs. Why did this happen? Elena sighs, kicking him hard in the knee to snap him out of his trance. Have you forgotten, she demands, your own wife was almost the first to become a deadborn. The memory hits Gus like a physical blow. He remembers Elena, pale and delirious, saved only by the silver-haired doctor from Frosttown. The losses last night were small, Elena explains, looking out the window. Only because Frosttown warned us to isolate those with symptoms, the lethargy, the hallucinations. They called it influenza to avoid a panic, but I knew better. She turns back to her husband, her voice sharp with urgency. Get ready, we are going to Frosttown right now. Gus stands up, finally finding his footing. Now, he asks. Now, she confirms, because this nightmare isn't just happening in Black Rock and your horse is faster than mine. Irwin felt he was having a lucky night. Opposite him sat a prominent merchant from the Stern territory, a man who held the keys to the trade routes Irwin had always dreamed of securing. The negotiations were going perfectly, almost too perfectly. The merchant accepted every condition, pausing only to rub his temples, complaining of a slight headache. Then it's settled, Irwin beamed, raising his glass. Cheers to our future cooperation. The merchant raised his glass in return, dry. His voice stopped. Irwin's smile froze. The man's face began to physically distort, not an expression but a literal writhing beneath the skin, as if countless tiny snakes were slithering under his flesh. His eyes shifted to a terrifying void of black and white. Then, the crystals appeared. Jagged black shards erupted through the skin like a horrific, blooming flower. Guards, Irwin screamed, guards. Silence. He had chosen this room for its soundproofing, a decision he now bitterly regretted. The creature that used to be a man pounced. Irwin scrambled backward, shattering glass and overturning furniture. He began a desperate, panting race around the table. 1 lap, 2 laps, 3. Spotting a cabinet, Irwin scrambled to the top, gasping for air. You can't catch me, he taunted, his voice trembling with a hint of panicked smugness. But the creature began to climb. No, 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 you shouldn't have a brain. Irwin leaped down, leading the monster in another exhausting dance around the room. Just as his legs were about to give out, the door swung open. His daughter, Lena, stood there, staring in disbelief at her father, the prestigious lord of Silverstream, waving his arms like a frightened animal atop a table. With 2 swift flashes of a blade, Captain Kyle ended the nightmare. Irwin slid off the table, his face ashen. I'm still alive, he tried to regain his dignity, smoothing his clothes. It was a tactic, Lena. I was wearing it down, consuming its energy. But the night was far from over. By dawn, the manor was a graveyard. 12 dead, 6 turned into monsters. Reports from the territory were worse. The trade routes were collapsing into chaos. Irwin knew there was only one person who might have answers, Benjamin of Frosttown. Lena, Irwin commanded, staring at the rising sun. I'm going to Frosttown, now. That night, as his railcar sped through the darkness, Irwin tried to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the black crystals and the burning eyes. He shuddered, whispering a prayer to the silence, that Benjamin would have a way to stop the end of the world. The carriage sped through the morning light, but Elwyn Hawthorne had no interest in the scenery. His mind was trapped in a nightmare from the previous night, watching a merchant from the Westerlands transform into a leaping, bounding monster. He subconsciously rubbed his leg, it still ached from the pursuit. For months, Elwyn had let his daughter, Lena, represent the family in Frosttown. She was eager to learn, and he was happy to mentor her, but today required his personal presence. I heard Frosttown recently annihilated a swarm of deadborn flyers from the capital, Elwyn muttered. Kyle, the guard captain, borrowed from Lena, nodded. Yes, sir, their army is superior and the Night Walter is a legend. Elwyn leaned back, thinking of Benjamin's philosophy, grasp both soft and hard power. Elwyn handled the soft power, the trade, the propaganda, and that brilliant Mandate of Heaven slogan that had spread even to the south. He felt a swell of pride until he looked out the window. He froze. They had reached Frosttown much faster than expected. It wasn't a mistake in his timing, it was the city itself. Frosttown was expanding at a terrifying rate. Where there had been wasteland months ago, there were now foundations, stone movers, and rows of houses sprouting like mushrooms. At the station, Elwyn met Baron Guys and his wife, Elena. The Baron looked haggard. Don't even mention last night, Guys roared, his face falling. It was agonizing. As they walked toward the administrative center, Elwyn noticed something unsettling. The people of Frosttown were calm. There was no panic, no lingering dread of the monsters. They went about their business as if the world hadn't almost ended yesterday. They're too calm, Guys whispered. They must have known. Elwyn realized the truth. Benjamin had warned them months ago under the guise of a flu outbreak. Those near Frosttown had prepared, but what of the four great realms? The thought was as cruel as it was politically necessary. Inside the administrative hall, a dozen exhausted lords paced and whispered. They were told that Administrator Sullivan was unavailable. Elwyn sat quietly, knowing Sullivan was far too methodical to be late by accident. This was a calculated wait. Finally, the silence was broken by approaching footsteps. An official entered the room. The administrator invites everyone to the meeting room for a discussion. Sullivan is in trouble. He sits heavily in his private office chair, the weight of a dozen reports pressing down on him. Each page tells the same grim story: anomalies in the territories, rising casualties, and the panicked reactions of the local lords. Beside him, his young assistants sit in a suffocating silence, their eyes darting, their heads bowed, none of them brave enough to offer a solution. Sullivan sighs, his gaze drifting to the corner of the room. There sits Evelyn, the intelligence chief of Frosttown. She is leaning back by the window, sipping tea with a detached, almost bored expression. You seem quite relaxed, Sullivan remarks, his brow furrowing. Evelyn looks up, her voice cool and indifferent. It doesn't matter to me, since I haven't been directly involved. Sullivan feels his blood pressure spike. Outside that door, the lords, Guys, Elwyn, and the others are waiting for answers. They want to know why the living are turning into the dead, and why Frosttown remained so eerily peaceful while their lands burned. The truth is complicated. Sullivan handles politics and coin. The mysteries of the Deadborn belong to the Baron and the frighteningly efficient Chesvia. Frosttown is safe only because Chesvia foresaw the crisis, rounding up the potential converts before the transformation could take hold. But Sullivan cannot tell the lords that. He cannot tell them their neighbors were arrested by a woman who seemingly predicts the future. Evelyn stands, her expression finally turning serious. Lord Sullivan, when I was with Chesvia, I heard things. She begins to explain the signs, the auditory hallucinations, the fevers, the dark lines creeping under the skin. She speaks of recovery facilities and ancient ruins. Sullivan listens intently, then cuts her short. That is enough, I know what to say. He turns to his assistants, his voice stern. You lot, stay here, think carefully about how to handle the next crisis. Sullivan pushes open the door to the living room. The air is thick with tension. Elwyn of Silverbrook and Guys of Blackrock stand among 8 other lords, their eyes locking onto him instantly. Sorry to keep you waiting, Sullivan says smoothly. Guys steps forward, his face etched with anxiety. Tell us quickly, my people are dying, I need to know why. Sullivan walks to the center of the room, commanding the space. Frosttown was prepared, he begins, pausing for dramatic effect, not because of prophecy, but because our research into transformers is more advanced than yours. He explains that certain people carry a dormant trait, a hidden spark that was activated last night by a specific condition. What condition? Elena asks. The ruins, Sullivan lies convincingly. Remnants of a previous empire, one beneath the capital, another in the south. They are emitting a signal, recycling something ancient. It activates the latent sickness within the human body. The room falls into a stunned silence. So there is nothing we can do, Guys asks, his voice trembling. Sullivan looks him in the eye. We wait for the Baron to return from the south, but more importantly, the kingdom will never be at peace until the capital is captured. That is the source. As long as it stands, the mutations will continue. His voice grows stronger, ringing through the hall. The Baron went south to resolve the crisis there. We must prepare to march on the capital. The silence stretches for a long moment until Elwyn speaks up. Tell me what you need. Silverbrook's supplies are yours. Guys nods, his fear replaced by a grim resolve. Conquering the capital, a goal to make the blood boil. As the other lords murmur their agreement, Sullivan breathes a secret sigh of relief. The lie has taken root, the enemy is identified, the goal is clear, and the United Commune finally has a single, driving purpose. After Benjamin departed for the south, Chesvia should have left immediate. Lie for Fallinglight territory, but she couldn't. She was waiting for a specific woman riding a chestnut mare, Evelyn, the intelligence minister. As the horse trotted to a halt at the city gates, Evelyn dismounted with agile, tireless movements. Chesvia eyed her curiously. What fraction of Evelyn has come? She asked. Evelyn blinked, then realized Chesvia was referring to her Nen Blade ability, a power that allows her to split her body while maintaining a single consciousness. Controlling two bodies is easy, one works while the other rests. But three, that is the limit. The third body can only manage simple tasks, like nodding or walking. Number 3, Evelyn replied. 1/3 of Evelyn, Chesvia nodded, before adding cryptically, maybe one day you'll split into a whole van. Evelyn was baffled what was a van, but she didn't ask. Night fell over the Holy Spring territory. The two women settled into a guest house arranged by Livia where the cathedral's spire gleamed under a silver moon. Suddenly, a knock. It was Livia. She entered with a gentle smile and a basket of homemade milk pancakes. But as she approached Chesvia, the air shifted. Something was burning in Livia's eyes, a flickering black-and-white fire, the flames of the dead. Without a word, Livia reached into the basket, grabbed a steaming pancake, and snap, she slapped it right across Chesvia's face. Don't waste food, Evelyn cried out, but the chaos had already begun. Livia unleashed a barrage of semi-transparent barriers. Chesvia reacted instantly, her palms erupting with pale, pure fire and crackling lightning. Are you crazy? Chesvia shouted, shattering the barriers as the room dissolved into a mess of broken wood and charred walls. The two were locked in a fierce, rhythmic stalemate. Chesvia cursed, Benjamin was right to call you a stupid woman. Why are you targeting me? Seeing the battle would never end, Evelyn quietly circled behind Livia. She picked up a wooden leg from a broken chair, aimed carefully, and bang, knocked Livia unconscious. Chesvia gasped, checking the fallen woman. Faint black lines were spreading beneath Livia's skin. She's transforming, Chesvia whispered, but she's Benjamin's friend. I can't let her become a monster. As Chesvia began the healing process, Evelyn looked down at the remaining pancakes in the basket. You're not still thinking about eating, are you? Chesvia snapped. No, Evelyn replied innocently, but you still have crumbs in your hair. Livia opened her eyes to an unfamiliar ceiling and the acrid, lingering scent of something burned. She tried to sit up, but a sharp spike of pain forced her back down. Don't move. The voice was cold. Livia turned her head to find a woman with silver-white hair and piercing red eyes, her expression twisted into a mask of pure disgust. Livia blinked, her mind a total blank. You, she whispered. Who are you? Why am I here? The woman, Chesvia, didn't answer. She simply stared with deepening contempt. Livia looked away, but her eyes caught something strange on the woman's face. Crumbs, pancake crumbs, stuck in her hair and smeared on her cheeks. Madam, Livia said, her voice suddenly serious, why do you have food crumbs on your face? Is it because they were delicious? Silence fell. Chesvia's eye twitched. She turned to the side where a girl named Evelyn stood, gripping a heavy wooden stick. Evelyn, Chesvia muttered, give her another whack. I'm awake, Livia shrieked, springing out of bed and waving her hands wildly. I'm really awake. She scrambled for an excuse, her voice rising in panic. I'm innocent, that wasn't me attacking you, it was an evil consciousness controlling my body. Chesvia actually laughed, that hollow, breathless laugh of someone who is utterly speechless. Incredible, she sighed. How do you come up with these lies so quickly? Chesvia composed herself. There was no time for mockery, she needed a puppet. Holy Spring territory is in chaos, she said sharply. People are transforming into the Deadborn. You are the Lord here, a nun of the Pale Church. Go out there, tell them the messenger of the goddess has arrived. Livia nodded frantically, straightening her disheveled robes. As she reached the door, she paused, her face pained. Thank you for bringing me back to life, but please, could you not tell Benjamin about tonight? Once Livia stumbled out, Evelyn turned to Chesvia. The city is crawling with transformers, she reported. The temple knights are fighting back, but some monks have turned too. Chesvia's gaze darkened. She knew what this meant. The hidden remains of a goddess had been disturbed, a resurrection facility had been activated, and something dangerous had been taken. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Hurricane City, Benjamin sat on the cold castle steps. Behind him, his elites stood guard, their hands on their sword hilts. Aphrodite sat beside him, watching the horizon. What are you thinking about? She asked. The dead are everywhere, Benjamin replied softly. East, west, north, and now here in the south, there is nowhere safe. Inside the castle, the screams of dying monsters echoed through the halls. Benjamin didn't move. He was waiting for Celia to return, but the closer the moment came, the more his heart filled with a nameless, creeping dread. The dead born that night were merely an appetizer. The real danger arrives at dawn. Benjamin stood atop the high city wall, watching a black tide surge on the distant horizon. It was the army of the dead, vast and mighty, emerging from the depths of the southern border. No one expected them from that direction. They simply moved forward, never stopping. Hurricane City, the legendary core of the Southern Territory, stood ready. Its walls were high, its military strong. Archers knocked their arrows, spearmen held their positions, and catapults Ray pushed into place. The atmosphere was tense but not chaotic. Upton, the old commander, stood at the highest point of the wall. He invited Benjamin to join him. Come on, the old man said. Stand in the best spot and take a look with me. Benjamin did not refuse. He wanted to see how this legendary city defended itself. The battle began with a roar. The southern border guards struck first, raining arrows and massive stones upon the undead. But what truly caught Benjamin's eye were the Rose Knights. They moved across the battlefield like sharp knives, knights and squires working in perfect unison. The most dazzling was their leader, Brynhua. Clad in red armor, she was a spinning rose of death. Her sword skirt, a ring of enchanted blades, swirled and slashed around her, spraying black blood with every turn. Benjamin felt a sudden, inappropriate urge to laugh. Between Brynhua and his friend Ella, he wondered, was this a rose group or a sword control group? Upton turned to him with a smug grin. Baron, he asked, how do your knights compare to my Rose Knights? Benjamin looked at the battlefield and replied, far surpassing. Upton beamed with satisfaction, but he misunderstood. Benjamin meant that the soldiers of Frosttown far surpassed these knights. Their traditional methods were outdated. The future of war belonged to dust crystal weapons and technology, not knightly charges. Suddenly, chaos erupted at the rear of the undead army. A new banner fluttered in the wind, Celia's banner. She charged like lightning, cutting through the enemy ranks with incredible speed. The soldiers erupted in cheers. The princess is back, kill them all. Benjamin watched her, a complex mix of emotions welling up inside him. It had been many years. Without her, he might still be a struggling serf. He respected her. He was grateful to her, yet he felt a strange doubt. When the gates finally opened, Celia stood there. The morning light gilded her pale pink hair. She rushed forward and took his hand. Benjamin, I've been waiting for you for so long. In that moment, Benjamin saw something chilling. Celia's pale red eyes flashed a deep, unnatural blue-green. It lasted only a second, a flickering illusion. What's wrong? She asked, her eyes returning to red, her smile as familiar as a memory. It's nothing, Benjamin replied softly. I just haven't seen you for a long time. The sun rose over the Hurricane City, shining on the cheering soldiers and the two old friends. but the shadow of that flicker remained. Celia returned in triumph, a hero of the siege. By shattering the Deathborn lines from the rear, she turned the tide of battle, earning her place as the undisputed star of the evening. Inside the banquet hall, the atmosphere is stiflingly extravagant. Silver cutlery gleams under a sea of candles, and the air is thick with the boisterous laughter of the old aristocracy. Benjamin sits tucked away in a corner, nursing a glass of W.E., watching the spectacle with a detached weariness. "I really can't understand their obsession with these things," a voice murmurs from the side. Benjamin turns to find Celia sitting beside him. She wears a helpless smile, her pale red eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "I don't like banquets at all," she whispers, "just like you." When she suggests sneaking away to a place where no one will bother them, Benjamin nods. They slip through the corridors and emerge onto a deserted, moonlit terrace. Below them, the lights of Hurricane City twinkle like fallen stars. But they aren't truly alone. Hidden in the shadows of the entrance, three figures watch with bated breath. Walter, Benjamin's loyal guard, crouches low, his brow furrowed as if scouting an enemy camp. Beside him, Aphrodite stands on tiptoe, face alight with scandalous excitement. Behind them both, Percival stands with arms crossed, utterly bewildered. "Do we really need to do this?" Percival hisses. "She is his superior, his friend. What is the danger?" Aphrodite gives him a look of pity. "You are too green. We aren't worried about that asterisk kind of safety." On the terrace, the conversation flows from the past to the present, from their old traveling days to the rise of the United Commune. But as they speak, Benjamin notices a change. Celia has become all-affirming. Every word he speaks is met with glowing praise. She leans closer, her eyes softening in the silvery light. "I always feel a little lonely," she says softly, taking a step toward him. "Sometimes I think, if only you were there with me." Benjamin's mind races. What is happening? He wonders, panic rising. When did I become so charming? As she reaches out and takes his hand, Benjamin freezes. In the shadows, Walter is practically grinding his teeth to powder. "Push her away," he groans in a low voice. "My lord, stay true to yourself." But on the terrace, the world is quiet. Celia looks at him, her smile bright and warm. "I'm just so happy to see you," she says. Benjamin is speechless, and in the darkness, the three watchers remain, caught between duty, drama, and total confusion.